Let's start recording. Alright, we're live as well. I can just check the stream is on real quick. It is on. Have we got anyone here? Sick. Alright. We can see the chats here as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone comes in with something interesting, I'll just pass it on to you.
Yep.
I think I'm gonna need some coffee after that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was not a normal setup for me. Want some more coffee?
Yeah, sure.
What are we drinking here, Camille?
We're drinking Arabic coffee.
And you're actually quite known for your Arabic coffee.
Yeah. I used to be a bit more enthusiastic about it. Now it's like, during the lockdown, I made like an Instagram coffee page called Spicy Arabic Coffee.
I remember you talking about a
Yeah.
little small place to make coffee for people properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But since then, I just kept it as a hobby, like just whenever people come over.
Oh.
And yeah, it's my take on Melbourne coffee, you know, it's like traditional coffee.
Yeah, okay. Beautiful.
Yeah.
How did you get into Lebanese coffee?
I just love coffee in general, and what I like about coffee, like Arabic coffee specifically, is that you can add things to it. Like cardamom is a common one,
Mm-hmm.
and some places they add like mastic into it, and there are different ways to make it as well. Like some people like it with the cream, and there's a different way to get the cream and everything. Like it's its own art.
With the cream, do you mean the head? Like
The head,
what?
yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, and like the more you stir it as well, the lighter the head becomes.
Yeah.
So you can make your own designs.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I had good fun during the lockdown, but now I just like,
Back to real life.
yeah, I need like quick coffee before I do like the things I need to do.
What's your quick coffee? Is it still Lebanese coffee or Arab coffee?
And actually now, since I moved to South Sierra,
Okay.
we have a coffee machine actually. So
Okay.
it's been very convenient.
I've just come to the coffee machine. Like,
Mhm.
I was not huge on it, but we recently got one where you just put beans in at least. 'Cause
Yeah.
There was a pod machine before that, and I hate pod machines.
Yeah, pod machines are not good.
They're disgusting.
Yeah, they're
But,
more. I even heard it's not real coffee most of the time.
It's like when you buy za'atar in Lebanon, and they always make those jokes like, "Oh, no, like they put like wood grains and
Yeah,
stuff."
exactly,
You know,
yeah.
it's not proper za'atar.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like that with pod machines. Who knows what's in there?
Yeah, exactly.
Like-
Totally. Yeah. So yeah.
I have to say, sorry, it was a bit of a rush since you got here. It was just kind of like meet the family, see the place,
Yeah.
sit down, get this going, and we haven't had a sec to just sit down.
Yeah.
It's really good to see you.
Yeah.
It's been
likewise.
a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
You've been a busy guy.
Mm-hmm.
You've been back in Lebanon, and I'm assuming around Europe a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I've sort of been away in my world doing my thing as well. I guess just really quick, catch me up on the last few months of Camille.
No, everything has been good. Like since I went to Lebanon, it was good because last summer in Lebanon was really. I felt there was a bit of a rebound from the crisis. So
Mhm.
people like there were lots of parties happening, lots of things.
Yeah.
Of course, not to romanticize it and say that there are no more problems. There are still lots of problems, but at least tourism made a comeback
Yep.
in some way. But unfortunately, like as soon as I came back, less than a month, the war started. So
Yeah.
who knows what it's like? I mean, my friends tell me that in some areas you don't feel like there's a conflict,
Okay.
but that also talks a bit about how the segregation in Lebanon from area to area,
Mm-hmm.
because the south is really going
Affected.
through a lot.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I'm planning to go back there also in end of April for 6 months. Hopefully, they'll still like that summer. Hopefully, like the war won't affect the upcoming, let's say, summer season in Lebanon.
Yeah, because you have some work lined up there.
Yeah, a bit of, but also it's a bit like a pilgrimage for me because all my friends who had to migrate, they come back in summer,
In
so we
summer.
all meet up, and it's a bit special, you know. It's like.
It's like soul food.
Yeah, it's like exactly. It's like we make up for what our life would have been if we still lived in Lebanon all together with like, because obviously living in the West, it's a bit life is more stable. It's a bit easier to make money. So when you go back to Lebanon, we're a bit more well off.
We're the
So,
lucky ones.
Yeah, we're
'Cause
we're so
can-
lucky, honestly.
Because we can go back and appreciate our time there, and then get away from it when it all goes to shit.
Yeah, exactly. No, definitely. And also like the fact that we can afford going out, you know, it's funny because like when I went there was a bit of a beef between the Lebanese expats and people who stayed there because
really?
everything became more expensive because of us. So
Yeah.
and also people, because like there are no rules really in Lebanon, so anyone can price.
Whatever
Like
they
sometimes
want.
you had two bars right next to each other where like one, let's say whiskey One of them was like $3-4. Well, next door it's like $20 for
Yeah,
the same
okay.
thing. So if you know where you're going, you don't spend that much. But
Yeah,
like,
but if you don't know
it's
where
easy
you're
to be
going,
trapped.
you get
Yeah,
extorted.
exactly.
Yeah, I think because we wanted to go last year, I couldn't go unfortunately. But I remember my cousin was just kind of like, "We love you. We want to see you.
Mm.
None of us can like we can't. If you came, we couldn't go anywhere. We
Yeah.
can't afford to do anything right now. We're like
Mm.
we're trapped. So yeah, there is fun times to be had, and then there's also the people who are living in it. And I mean, you know that
Yeah.
you got family there as well. You got
No, of
tons of
course.
family there.
And I feel a lot of it also is about the attitude, because
Mhm.
like you have people who go and they just show off their money and they want to go to the most
Oh my
overpriced
God.
places.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you go there with a bit of humility and like you shout your friends a few drinks,
Yeah.
you know, without really making a big deal out of your privilege, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like,
Mhm.
I think it's less of a bad thing as well, you know, to...
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a gorgeous instrument.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the distinct pleasure of hearing you play it multiple times now, and I'm seeing that you're doing pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because some of the audience or most of the audience won't be Middle Eastern.
Yep.
Tell me what this is.
So this is the Qanoun. Qanoun actually translates to low in Arabic. There's a theory that it was called this way because of the way you can, like it sets the tuning low for the rest of the instruments.
Okay.
Because in
That
Arabic
makes sense.
music, our music is very microtonal and
Mhm.
very pitch based.
Yep.
Apparently it was called Qanoun because it sets like the basis of the
The
tuning.
guides.
But someone like a music researcher told me that it's not very true. Like it's not true information, so it's hard really to confirm on that. But at least it gives you a little introduction of what this instrument is.
The vibe of the instrument.
The vibe of the instrument, exactly.
Do you feel like the people? So I don't know this at all. So please correct me if I'm wrong. But do you feel like because it's also called the Qanoun and it had that sort of mythology about it,
Mhm.
the person who was playing it was kind of like the conductor or like the centerpiece of the orchestra, or was it more?
In a way, I feel like, because like in the traditional Arabic ensemble, this plays the role of the piano in a
Mhm.
Western ensemble.
Yeah.
Like piano, like you have a large range, you can like you have more fingers to work with, so I feel it plays that role where
Mm.
like sometimes it's like you take a lot of the melody and rhythm because it's also very rhythmical the way
Yeah.
you play it. So it takes a lot of that, you know, and especially like like in Kulthum when we listen to those old recordings,
Yeah.
and they have like a high pitch, like very powerful melody. A
It's
lot of
often
time
this.
it's often this, yeah.
Where like the oud has functionally and looks very similar to a guitar, and obviously the guitar draws its lineage from the oud.
It does, yeah.
Does that have a similar function in terms of the Middle Eastern ensemble?
Yeah, I mean the four traditional instruments of an ensemble. When I say traditional, I'm talking about classical Arabic music and not folk,
Yep.
because that's something that people usually confuse. Like when we speak about world music, you know, it's all world
Sure,
music.
yeah, it's all one.
But
thing.
no, like in classical Arabic music, you have the Qanoun,
Uh-huh.
the oud, the nai, the flute,
Yeah.
as well as the violin.
Yes,
Okay, and the reason why those four instruments
chosen.
are chosen is because first of all they have a different range
Yeah.
and a different expression. Like the Qanoun and the oud are both plucked instruments, so
Yeah.
they're staccato, while the nai and the violin are both legato, so
Mhm.
long notes instruments, and they have different ranges. So the oud is more like the bass,
Yes.
and the fact that it's fretless, like if you only play the bass note, it sounds a bit like a double bass in some
Mhm,
ways, the
mhm,
oud.
mhm.
But the Qanoun is more like it thrives more in its high pitches and very fast like tremolos and high
Yes.
pitches.
Yeah,
While
absolutely.
the oud gives more the bass and some more like glides and stuff like this.
It's interesting because now that you've highlighted the Middle Eastern ensemble to me, you've sort of you described it as like the staccato instruments and then the legato instruments, so like short sounds and longer sounds essentially. Of the two categories, both have what I would describe as a discrete note and then a glide note.
Yeah.
So with the violin, it fits perfectly into Middle Eastern music because there's no frets.
Exactly,
There's no you can play any of the notes in between
Totally.
any
Yeah.
microtone that you want. The oud is the same, and then you have the nai, which is discrete. I imagine it's discrete.
I mean, actually out of the violin and the nai I feel is the more piercing one. It's
But
like-
what I mean by discrete is not discrete as in like quiet. I mean discrete in terms of you can only play the notes that are built into the instruments.
Actually, yeah, but on the Nye also, like the embouchure, the way you play it is a bit different, so you can easily bend notes.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
beautiful.
you have more
So it has
flexibility.
access to
It
microphones.
does, and that's why it's considered a classical instrument. If it didn't, it would be a folk used in folk context.
Music.
Yeah, because in
That's
folk
really
music, it's like the scales are less complex; they're a bit more basic,
Yeah, okay.
and you would
Accessible.
modulate. Yeah, they're more accessible. You would modulate less. It's like. And often you in folk music you use just like the first half of the scale.
Yeah, okay.
While whenever you want to do modulations and more intricate things, that's what the like classical instruments would come into place a bit more.
Brilliant. Okay, so not to get because there's a lot that I want to learn.
Yeah.
All right. Basically, treat me like I'm the audience.
Yeah.
You might not be able to see clearly on the camera, but every string is actually 3 strings here.
Yeah.
And then on the side closest to me, we have the tuning pegs for each string. And then closer to you on that same side are tuning keys.
Yeah, we call them the mandals.
Mandals.
Yeah, mandals, and that's how you set your note.
Yep.
Because like, where on a piano you would play like a sharp or or like a natural or a flat, here you would just move this a bit like a harp.
Yep.
So see. So here I'm playing the same note,
Yep.
but I flip the mandal so it plays a different note.
And each mandal is a quarter of a tone?
No, actually less than that. Each 6 mandals are a semitone.
Wow.
So each 3 of those are a quarter of a tone.
Every 6. And how many, is there a standard amount across? No, there's more on this side than there are down
Yeah,
there.
because
Not enough
higher
space.
pitch, there's no space. So
And also-
and also it's less noticeable.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the thing, because like the reason why I'll get through the scales a bit later,
Yeah.
because each one of those is 8 cents only.
Yeah, okay. So, sorry, just to explain it. A cent is 1/100th of a note. Basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you have C, and then you have C, like there's 100 cents within C, essentially.
Yeah.
And then the 100th cent would be D.
Exactly.
So the way that they usually describe it is plus and minus 50.
Yeah.
So C is at 0, and then 25 above that is like halfway in between C and C sharp, just so
Yeah.
everyone can understand. So.
Yeah, people most likely have seen like the cent thing if they're using like audio softwares to fix the pitch, like if
Exactly.
something's out of tune to
Yeah.
fix it. But yeah, it's very rich because also our music is very pitch based and
Yeah.
from scale to scale. Because you know how like in Western music, for example, like C major is the same as A minor, for example, like same notes.
Starting from a different
Yeah,
position.
exactly. But except like in Arabic music, if I wanted to go in theory, like a C major and an A minor, there would be like some different intervals just to make it sound a bit more like to emphasize the emotions from the scale.
Emphasize the A minorness of it versus
Exactly,
the C
yeah.
majorness. Okay, so that used to exist in Western
It
music.
did, yeah.
And then, I mean, positively or negatively, the Catholic Church asked instrument builders if there was a way to make, because they were making essentially like 12 different pianos,
Yeah.
right? And it's expensive. And they were like, well, can we not fund this? Can we make it cheaper? And then they devised the system that we use now, which is the 12-tone equal temperament,
Which is more mathematic.
which is very mathematic. And it's, to be honest, it's a very elegant, very genius solution. And some people that I've heard said that the way that we understand jazz and the specific tension in jazz wouldn't quite exist in the same way
If not, yeah.
without that. So there are pros and cons to the system. One of the cons is that, as you're saying, the ratios are not preserved accurately between different.
And you have
Yeah.
less options as well. Like it is a genius. The 12 tone is a genius system again, like we saw in jazz for harmonies, making complex harmonies and like chord progressions, etc. But I mean, our music technically doesn't have chords.
Yeah, its harmony is more implied by the melody than it is.
Not even. It's like there's
Harmony
no.
is disregarded.
It's disregarded. It's more and that lets you do much more melodic. I mean, you have microtonal scales that are very interesting, as well as very interesting modulations when you're doing a solo.
Yes.
Because sometimes, like let's say, because I mean, in theory, you can fit some scales to a chord, and I'll give some examples later. But like, let's say I'm doing a solo and you're playing like, let's say a solo in E, and you're playing in E minor, then I'm constrained to the 5th and the 3rd that you're playing. While like, what if I want to play like the 5th flat, for example?
Yep.
Even there's, for example,
It would sound out of tune in Western music, whereas without the context of a chord, you can do whatever you want
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
Middle Eastern music.
Yeah, and I can do less. Like if I'm hearing the fifth constantly, it means I can't flatten the fifth or like play around with it. As well as, for example, there are even scales like the Locrian scale, which in Western music is very, it's seen as a useless scale, you know?
In a sense.
In a sense,
Yeah.
yeah. But like, for example, in Middle Eastern music, this scale exists, and the way it's played, you
It's
know?
common.
Yeah, and not having the harmony, it sounds much nicer without the harmonic context.
So Locrian scale has a lot of flattened notes that if you were to build chords out of it, it's not that it would be fundamentally depressing. It's just that it would be it would seem dissonant. It would seem...
I can play it if you want, just
yeah, go for it,
briefly, like-
absolutely. See, the thing is, I hear that, and that is intensely pleasing to me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I think it's hard for me to escape the Middle Eastern context that I grew up with.
Yeah.
I was born there, but I didn't live there as long as you did. But I did listen to a lot of the same
No,
music.
of course, yeah.
And so hearing that, I'm like, gorgeous. Like,
Yeah.
I just want to hear you explore that.
I think it's just if you put it again in a harmonic context, it would be a bit harder to listen to. Like if
Exactly.
you wrote many chords, if you depended on the chords around it, there's not much you can do with that scale. So it's.
But also, I think if you also heard that on a piano, it would fundamentally sound different. The overtones of the piano
Of course,
lend
yeah,
itself
yeah.
differently. The number of strings have on the Qanoun, which piano has multiple strings per
Yeah.
note, but the way that it choruses, the way that the slight changes in pitch between the three different
Yeah, exactly.
string has a softening effect. Do you know what I mean? And likewise, something that I was thinking about recently, you know, like classical guitar, how it's nylon string, because this is nylon strings, right? I feel like the classical guitar with nylon strings is kind of like the Fender Rhodes of the guitar world. Because, you know, with the Fender Rhodes, it has that very dull, warm sound to it.
Yeah.
I feel like without all of that overtone structure, you can get away with doing more complex harmony and with doing more complex melodies.
Yeah.
Because you're hearing more of the fundamental, more of what the note actually is rather than all of the color above it.
Yeah.
And it sort of doesn't clash as intensely as a result.
No, yeah, that's completely true.
And I'm hearing that with the nylon strings on the Qanoun.
Yeah, and you know, like sometimes people think, like when we look at traditional instruments, people think it's like we kind of disregard the genius of people who designed these instruments.
Oh man,
You know, like we think like it just probably
happened.
it happened, you know, but
It was inevitable.
Yeah, but the fact that those instruments have this form today, it's centuries of progressing it, making it better. Like the mandals on the Qanoun, that's only 100 years old invention.
Oh wow! And this instrument would be about 1,000 years old.
Yeah, and it evolved differently. Like the ancestor it had was probably some more basic kind of harp that is still used in folk music today in Egypt and some parts of North Africa, and Yemen as well. And yeah, but for example, now in Iran there's the santur, which is like a Qanoun, but it uses like little hammers. And they probably like had a common ancestor, you know, but they evolved differently because Iranian music also evolved, took its own path with Arabic music, and they designed their instruments so that they serve their musical system a bit better. Yeah,
absolutely. It is a product of the culture and the geography that it is existing in, you know, which is why I find it so interesting that we use a violin at all in Middle Eastern music. You know, that would be one of the things that sort of went the other way to a certain degree.
But that also, it's because the violin can, like, whenever you want to preserve a culture, it's good to preserve it from like without really morphing it, because the ancestor of the violin is called, like, we had many ancestors of the violin. Like they have in Turkey, they had the kemençe. By the way, just to clarify, like music in Turkey, the Arab world, and like big part of Iran, even Greece to some extent, you know, they're very related to each other.
Absolutely.
Like the scales are very similar. The modes, like a musician from each of those countries can easily jam with another musician. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, the Greeks would have the bouzouki.
Yeah, the bouzouki,
which is very similar to the oud, for example.
Yeah,
and
there's even the Arabic bouzuk as well. That's literally like a bouzouki, but it has microtonal frets as well.
There you go. So the other thing that I watched this video essay on was how, like, Western music has a sort of the default is considered like 4/4,
Mm.
4 beats of a quarter note length, whereas in a lot of Middle Eastern music and Turkish, well, I guess a lot of it kind of got disseminated from Turkey, right? Because they were in the area for so long, and that's why a lot of Greek and Middle Eastern and Turkish music is somewhat related.
It is
To some
but
degree.
to some degree, but it is it's not the only reason.
Okay.
Like because the Turks, when they came to there, because the Turks are originally not from the area, like historically.
Yep.
So when they came, they adopted many of the traditions.
Sure.
But like for example, the way they play, like the maqam,
Mm-hmm.
is an Arabic system.
Yep.
Like it was kind of put together by actually by Arabs who got inspired by the Iranian system, the Persian
Okay, there you
system
go.
back then. But like they kind of set up the rules, and
Yep.
then even in Turkey they use the word maqam for scale, which is an Arabic word.
Yeah.
They just like the way they evolved it was different than how Arabs
Of course,
did. You know?
Well,
But
it suits their musical needs.
yeah, exactly. And but for example, you find lots of more like those maqams are played in sometimes in some areas of Turkey, like in a more pentatonic way,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of how to like reflects the Central Asian history of Turks. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
music in that area plays more on the pentatonic kind of aspect of the
Mhm.
scale, but they're using the maqam system. For now.
So,
Just, I just want to go back to the
yeah,
violin
yeah,
because
yeah,
we
please
didn't
do.
finish that. I just want to say that, like, the reason why the violin came as it is because all those bowed instruments that were used had some limitations in terms of scales and like range,
Mhm.
and also their sound sometimes was a bit too rough. So when you played that with like in a classical ensemble, sometimes it would not.
You're talking about Middle Eastern bowed instruments?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I have one here. I can bring it out in
The
a second.
rabab, the one,
Rabab.
yeah, exactly. And like those instruments, they evolved to be more folk.
I was going to say, because
yeah.
I think my grandfather used to play one just in the Daya, which is
Yeah.
like a village.
Yeah. More folk, but the violin served the maqam system more than those instruments did, and that's why kind of it was legit for it
Adopted.
to be adopted. You know?
Absolutely.
Because also something to consider with tradition, it's not good for it to be stuck in the past. Like it's good to evolve it as long as we're staying faithful to its like purpose or like its complexities in a way.
We were kind of alluding to this conversation when we were sort of chatting as it was getting set up, how like my parents, their image of Lebanon or Lebanese culture or Lebanese music is kind of stuck to the 80s when they left.
Yeah.
Or the 90s when they went back and then left again. Whereas the people in situ in Lebanon, they are, in a sense, evolving that culture constantly. They're reiterating.
Yeah.
It does change, but it is like it's authentic to what, like it's still Lebanese. It's just taking on maybe more influence, or maybe there's new thinkers, new music being made that is updated compared to when my parents were there. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's the nostalgia element here a lot that kind of dictates what people want to listen to. And even like myself, like the stuff I listen to and perform in Australia are very different than what I do when I go back to Lebanon.
Yeah,
Because there's this sense like we're far from our home, we feel uprooted in a way, so we want things that bring us back. Well, like when you live within the culture, there isn't really that drive, you know? It's not like we're here. On the contrary, we're like, you know, like after all the shit that we're going through, it's like we want we want something a bit different or new.
They want escapism, we want nostalgia.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the thing, like I like both in moderation in a way, you know, because sometimes in Lebanon people go to the extreme where they don't want any association with anything Arabic or like Middle Eastern. While here it's like I performed in some restaurants before. Now I stopped doing it for that reason. Is that like, you know, you have people who are very picky. They only want to listen to the same songs over and over, played the same way without any innovation. And for me, it puts culture in a museum where it doesn't belong. You know, culture is a living thing.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And I think what it might be missing, the idea of it needs to be played in this exact same way, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that's not how it ever was supposed to be.
Exactly,
It
yeah.
was like, if we take something, and I'd love to hear you play this later, like Ya Banat Iskandariya, it's like there is a known melody associated with that, but similar to jazz, there's the known head, and then there's the improvised section. Like, what does this maqam, what does this scale, or what does this melody inspire in me once I hear it, and then you sort of go off and you play that sort of stuff.
No, you got it on point. It's because large part of like mid 20th century, like mid 20th centuries onward, like nationalism plagued the Middle East, so that even affected music a lot because people thought that like westernizing was the way to go. So people started regarding music in its original improvised. Just to give a background, like Arabic music is it's a lot like jazz. Like a lot of it is very improvised. It's very phrase based. Unlike jazz, it's an oral tradition.
Yep.
You know, you're meant to use your ears a lot more than your eyes.
Yep.
Like, yeah, you should have like, especially because it's very pitch related. So you should really be able to like distinct the scales from each other. And after the 50s, you know, people like kind of tried to institutionalize music and they westernized it a lot. And like at the conservatory they started like teaching sight reading and they're teaching Arabic music in a very Western way. Even like with stuff like Kulthum, you know, you see all those big orchestras. Like our music is not designed for that. Yeah, it's like it kind of ruined a lot of the complexity of that music for the sake of like showing that like look how much budget we have to put an orchestra together, look how civilized we are,
look how Western we are,
look how Western we are. And it ruined like our like the intention of our music a lot, you know. And but fortunately now like contemporary musicians are more aware of that. So they're more trying to bring back that like oral tradition and like they're re-exploring maqam the way it's designed to be, you know what I mean, rather than just something Arabic sounding.
Well, so the first thing that I thought about when we were comparing it with jazz music was that I think what jazz musicians try to do, attempt to do, is once they've learned all the rules and learned to sight read and all that sort of stuff,
they break them.
Then they try to break that, which I think is more like the Middle Eastern oral tradition, which is focus on your ears, listen to what other people are doing, respond to that.
Exactly.
Don't think about the score and the structure and the specific things that need to be played. I don't know, like, you know, my music specifically is very structured, but I try and tell the guys, like when we're doing rehearsal, like, hey, when we play this live, if it goes in a slightly different direction, just keep eyes up, let's keep looking at each other, let's just see where it goes. You know, doesn't have to be, you know, 2 verses, 2 choruses, 2 verses, 2 choruses, end of song for everything.
Yeah.
It can be, hey, you know, I'm feeling this a bit more, let's play this a bit more. Sometimes, you know, it's hard to do it in some contexts, but I think the musicians who realize that music is a language and that we're having a conversation musically, realize that, hey, it doesn't have to be the same conversation every single time. It's more about a topic that we're discussing.
No, totally. And there's an element like that reminded me in Arabic music. There's an element we call heterophony. Yeah. Heterophony. Yeah,
so
it's
different.
It's the cousin of polyphony.
Okay, sure.
Okay, in a way to look at it, because many people think when we say we have no harmony in Arabic music, people think it's all monophonic.
But it's not.
It's not. It's heterophonic, which means is like the same melody. Like you have 4 different instruments, and that's why sight reading doesn't really work, because like you have 4 different instruments that are playing the same melody, but each one is embellishing it in their own way.
Yeah.
So in the end, you come up with 4 kind of different melodies that are blending together, and that's what makes it sound very complex.
Yes, absolutely.
I can give an example.
Please
like
do.
Maybe the example won't be extremely obvious because it's more obvious when you have like 2 instruments playing the same melody at once. But I'll play the same melody once without ornaments and once with ornaments, just so you see like how different it can be from one to another. So first one is, I'm gonna play it basically without ornaments, okay? Okay, so that was without embellishment. Now I'm gonna do it with embellishment. You see, I even did the modulation. I switched to like... Well, the first one was like... You see what I mean? Like it's lots phenomenal. Of things that when you combine them together, it's subtle, but when you... Like, let's say I'm playing the basic melody and there's a violin who did that, like it's a different way to enjoy the music.
Absolutely.
Especially someone like who's familiar with the melody. Every time you hear a different musician playing a melody, they'll interpret it in their own way.
100%.
and that's what makes like Arabic music interesting, or Maqam music in general interesting. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And that's something that got lost in history because people like they by westernizing the music, what it means you need an orchestra where everyone's playing the same score. Like imagine in an orchestra everyone's improvising their way. It will sound like the end of it will be a mess.
Whereas with 4 people, you still have the ability for everyone to sort of communicate.
Exactly, yeah.
What I think is interesting is hearing that solo. You have the freedom to do that and modulate, and it sounds totally, you know, to me that's very accessible. Doing that with 4 people, that would then add the complexity. Like it's like layering melodies.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think that's why what I said before is maybe not the correct way to say it. I said that the harmony is implied, but then you sort of described it as heterophony, which I think is that makes complete sense because we're not implying C minor or a chord within C minor. We're just the scale sets the mood, and all the melodies are sort of guiding us through that mood.
Exactly, yeah.
And I think when you're talking about bringing back that improvised culture, the oral tradition, that kind of reminded me. Have you ever looked at like raga music from India?
Raga is like the cousin of Maqam music.
That's what made me think of that, because there are ragas for different times of the day. It's about a scale, and then the expression and the improvisation and the translation of that scale with how the musician feels in that moment, or what he's trying to inspire in the people listening to them. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And raga music, just to compare Maqam with raga music takes a lot more the concept. First of all, they have lots of pentatonic scales, which we don't. Like they have some scales that are 7 notes, some scales that are 5 notes. But they really took to the next level the ascending, descending concept of a scale.
Okay.
We have that a bit in Arabic, but usually it's like one note that's different when you're ascending or descending. But you have some scales in raga music, like the ascending version is completely different than a like descending version of the scale. But for example, they have a lot less modulations than we do. Okay. Like for example, that modulation I did, it's less likely to happen in raga music. For example,
it's more
fixed in a way.
Gotcha.
It's more fixed, but they play a lot with the ascending and descending version.
Yeah, which is very interesting, actually. Yeah. Conceptually, it's very interesting.
No, it's like a story, yeah.
Because you set up on the way up, assuming that you started at the bottom and going up pitch-wise, you set up like a structure, and then you've kind of gone, that's not relevant for the way down.
Exactly, yeah. No,
it's a different journey.
Yeah. And that's kind of how you can tell, like if I tell you like this song is in this raga or maqam, you can kind of predict what's going to happen next because you already know the maqam, which enhances like the oral tradition we're talking about, because it's all ear memory in a way, you know. And there are themes that come back, because there are even like, that's a misconception as well, because the concept of Western scale is just a combination of notes. But there's another element in maqams or raga music. I'm going to go back focusing on maqams because I know a bit more. There's something we call the sayr. Sayr, which in Arabic means like the road or the path. Because sometimes you have 2 different scales that have exactly the same notes, but the way you play them is very different. Or like
emphasis is different?
Yeah, like some of them you start on the 5th, so it has like this powerful start and then it resolves.
Yeah.
While some others like you start low and then you end big. Okay, you know what I mean? So it's like a kind of a path or a guideline that you're following through the scale.
So, like, to put it into a West context, so you might be in A minor, but you might start on E.
Exactly, yeah.
And you'd be, like, in this kind of triumphant place. It sounds big because you're referencing A, I'm imagining, throughout the song, and you're getting that big sort of...
It's very mathematic in Western music. It's because, you have those notes. For example, I always have this with people, because you know how, like, for example... There's this, like, let's say a harmonic minor scale. Okay? So in Arabic music, you have many notes that starts on what in this case would be the 5th. So, but like in Arabic music language, I consider this to be the root.
Despite being the 5th of the same thing.
No, but like a Western musician knows this as part of the harmonic scale.
Sure.
So they would change the root. So that's a G, okay?
Yeah.
So in their head, they would be like, it's G harmonic minor, but I start on the 5th, okay? But in my head, no. Because, why? Because the emphasis of the melody is focusing more on this bit, which is
Yeah.
making this the root, like making this the what maqam it
So
is.
what?
And also, just to add one point,
Yeah,
so
go on,
like
please do.
in Arabic music, harmonic minor would be nahawand.
Nahawan.
It's called nahawand. If I was playing in nahawand, there are so many different ways I would play that scale.
Yep.
Like I would modulate to different notes, I would play different accidentals. But the fact that this is Hijaz in this, even though it has the same note, means I play it in a completely different way.
That's. I mean, you kind of highlighted that a little bit just
Yeah.
now. I'd love to hear some more in a bit.
Yeah.
I wanted to get your take on this, and because I would love for you to give us a working definition of maqam. Firstly, because it would help clear things up for me, and I think it would introduce the concept for people really well. But just before we do that, what you described to me sounds a lot like modal music, like modes of scale, right? Like people would think of what would you say? So, for example, Mixolydian. So we have C major. If you were to play C major starting on G, which is the fifth, like you're sort of talking about,
Yeah.
that would be G Mixolydian.
Yeah.
You're saying it's not that you think about it as G Mixolydian. Well, how would I sort of form this thought? Because I think people have the similar sort of Western music has a similar functioning thing where you're playing essentially C major, but you're just playing it starting from G, and so they're just thinking, well, this is G actually, right?
Yeah, but it's just that the notes, like let's say you're doing a solo, the notes you're focusing on and like the modulations you're doing and its relationship to other scales and melodies is different depending on the scale.
Absolutely.
It's like a web, it's like a spider web of
Sure.
things where it's not only about, again, the notes you're playing, but it's a lot about how you're playing it, you know?
Yeah.
If you want, I can give a quick example of 3 different scales that have exactly like almost the same notes.
Please do.
Just tell the difference about them. So the first one is one called Bayati. Bayati is like one of the most basic scales. It's almost like a minor, but the second is a microtone. So it would be like those are the first. So it's like between a Phrygian and a minor. That's the second. Okay. So if I wanted like to do a taqsim is almost like a solo, but later I'll explain the difference between a taqsim and a solo. So in Bayati it would be like. Okay, that's an example. It's not a complete taqsim. Second one I'm gonna show you is one. Actually, it's an Iraqi maqam called dasht. It has the same interval, but you start on the 5th, and there's a common modulation that has to happen where you flatten the 5th by a quarter tone, just like at the right time. It's like a phrase.
Okay.
Okay, so it happens like this. See, there's that emphasis on the 5th. You hear that note?
Yeah.
That's what makes it Dashti and not Bayati, the one I played before.
Yeah.
It's like a story, you know? Like each
Absolutely.
maqam is a story where you're taking it a different path. Like there are common scales you would switch to, even when you're composing a song. So let's say I'm composing a song in Dashti, means there's like a part in the song where I'm gonna do that accidental,
Yeah.
even if it's pre-composed, you know? And that's what defines a maqam in a way, unlike a scale, where a scale is just the notes, but this is like more of a 3D look on a scale where you have a certain story to each maqam as well.
We're kind of walking, so dancing around the definition of a maqam because, but I would like to get one from you. What I'm learning right now is that scale is in Western music notes structure. It's like these are the like do what you want in with these notes kind of thing. What I'm understanding is that a maqam is scale with a rough guide on the emphasis of the different notes or what you're trying to achieve by playing the different notes.
Yeah, it's more like phrases, you know? It's a combination of different phrases you would do.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like a guideline.
So tell us, what is a maqam then?
Yeah, it's so like for me, like when I want to compare it in my head, like a scale is like X, Y axis, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, I feel in a maqam there's a Y axis, which is what we just described as this sayr. And that's a bit where there are certain rules to play a maqam that are not how to say where you don't have entire freedom in a way to play the same way you would play with a normal scale, but it gives you a guideline that has other advantages and purposes in a way.
The main thing I'm hearing is phrases. So it's more than just notes. It's groups of notes with rhythm attached to it in a way. Could you like play a straight maqam for us, or is that not really the intention?
No, you can for educational purposes.
Yeah, so would you mind?
Yeah.
So you said Bayati is a basic one?
Yeah. For example, Bayati has this, that's the ascending one. And you just flatten the 6 on the descending version.
And how many, what do you call them, mandals?
Yeah.
How many did you bring across?
Now to flatten it, 3 mandals.
So can you play just side by side?
Yeah. You mean each mandal side by side?
Well, no, just the 3 and the 3.
Ah, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll do just the ascending and the descending.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So the descending is more like a Phrygian mode, while the ascending is another Bayati, so 3/4. And this makes you want to go like up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, this resolves
very nicely. And it's so beautiful that there is access to that level of tension control, really. Especially on an instrument.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, it is. And that's why, again, it's designed to, even like if you go more into hardcore like music, like more traditional, but like music researcher level kind of traditional. Academic. Like even there would be like the descending would have some other little intervals like this, and it's very complex like in this way.
Do you listen to any of that?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I love it, especially. But I mean, I separated. You know, there's some music that you would enjoy intellectually, and some music that you would feel. You know what I mean?
And there's the distinction there for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So I also wanted to highlight this is the tuning instrument tuning tool right here.
The key, yeah.
Tuning key.
I like to use it for sound effects as well.
Oh, for sure. We call that extended techniques in Western music.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a similar term for that? Or is it just kind of like?
No, I mean it's common to use them. Like there's more. I feel in like traditional classic Arabic music, there's more space for what you would call extended techniques. Yeah. But I don't think we have or there might be a name, like usually we'd call it, sorry if it's PG friendly, but we call it maniaket.
Maniaket, yeah, great.
Like with my friends.
How would you even translate maniaket?
Fuckery, kind of.
Fuckery, yeah, that's what I think, yeah. So
it's like fucking around basically, but they're legit, you know, in some places, like, especially in now more contemporary Arabic music, it's like, I mean, as long as it's not interfering with the main composition.
Sure. And
you're using it as an ornament, you know?
Absolutely.
For example, I once heard a piece where, because you know how you can use the key to do like a glide? So there's a piece that's like very serious and traditional, but the ending, like the Qanoun player took the key and ended on the octave above, like this.
Yeah.
And it sounded really beautiful. Yeah. Like it kind of complemented the composition and the melody, you know? So in this case, you can do a lot. You can, yeah.
So I'm going to ask some basic questions
again
because I'm curious, but I also think it's important for people to understand this. You said, "Hey, can you pass me this because I want to tune my instrument?"
Yeah.
And when I go to tune my guitar, you know, I plug it into my pedal, which tells me this is E at this octave is this many hertz.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously using the Western 12-tone equal temperament system. What is your guiding principle behind tuning this instrument? How do you go about tuning it?
So there are different ways tune, but like let's say the more accessible way is also to use a tuner,
Okay.
because like often I'm playing with other instruments here, and most people use the Western tuning, so I do the same. But then like once you set the bass tune to the like what, let's say 12 tone, but then like you can break that with the mandals, because
Okay.
you can raise 2 at a time, so it's not really 12 tone.
Yep.
But at least the A is 440 hertz.
So is that so? Do you mostly tune to A440 kind
Yeah,
of
but that's not the traditional way.
thing? Okay. So what's the traditional?
It would be a bit flatter. So, like often there, I mean, you know what's funny? Also in Indian music, like if you listen to classical Indian music, lots of the songs are in C sharp for some reason.
Okay.
While for us it's D.
Okay.
It's just I feel with history, you know, like people followed, because I think it was
It's
kind
gotten
of a set.
sharper and sharper and sharper.
Yeah, I think like for them they like in Indian music a lot of it was kind of standardized on the C sharp,
Okay.
while for us it got standardized on the D,
D.
like to make it kind of easier and more accessible, you know.
Okay.
But it used to be kind of in between the two, like kind of in between the two.
Yep.
Like if you listen to old, like very old recordings from the 20s, 30s, it was mostly in that area. And now, like whenever someone wants to make a very traditional sound as well, they do that, because I mean I feel that the instruments resonate a bit differently when you do it like
Absolutely.
that. So
Well, in the Western world, there was kind of a how do you say, like a tuning race or tuning war between different orchestras throughout the centuries, and different orchestras would tune slightly higher, you know, and then because A used to be like A 420 or something,
Yeah.
430, and then they would progressively tune it sharper and sharper and sharper. It was kind of this like things sound brighter and things, and you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Who knows? But that it's interesting to hear that the standard was lower tuning in India, and as it moves more west, and I guess it gets sharper and sharper.
yeah.
Sorry for what might be a silly
No,
question,
it's okay.
but so let's say you're tuning and you're starting from D, right? And you're just saying, cool, my bass note is D or my root note is D. I'm tuning to D in some sort of A440 standard or slightly less. Most music that I understand revolves around the concept of there being ratios between one note to the next. Now, in an ideal situation, a fifth is an exact 3-to-2 ratio from the tonic note.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas in Western music, because of the 12-tone equal temperament system, it's not exactly that. It approximates it, but it's not exactly that. Are you justly tuning this? Are you tuning it to be exactly a perfect fifth above the note that you're playing, or
Again, if I was to tune it traditionally, I do, but
Yes,
but whenever you want to play with different instruments, it
You have
becomes
to.
a nightmare.
yeah, you have to.
But then you can do it, because with those you can really control a lot. For example, I'll give a very basic example, like the major scale as we know it in equal temperament sounds something like this. Okay, but like the traditional way in Arabic music, which is just intonation, you flatten the third
A little
by
bit,
by a mandal and the fourth by 2 mandals. So
Yeah.
so the third and the fourth are a
Little
bit
bit
close to each other. So it sounds something like, I'll tune both just so you can hear it. So and it sounds less annoying, you know, like the way
man.
the major is annoying sometimes.
It's so pleasant.
Yeah.
It's really like, it's like butter. It's
Exactly,
smooth.
yeah.
It's creamy. I could just smear it all over.
It's more like relaxing. You know?
Yeah, it kind of resolves more intentionally.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Can you?
And there's, for example, the minor. The third is usually, as well as the six, you know? Like, let's say I'm gonna play a minor, where like the six is a bit flat as well. So it's... Now I'm gonna go to the sixth. Something like that.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Ah, no worries.
With that major example, can you again play the equal temperament 3 and 4 and try and do some of that improv?
Yeah, sure.
Just to highlight
The minor or the major?
the major.
Yeah.
Only to highlight, I think, the
The
fluidness.
difference, yeah. So first I'll play the other one again, just so it sticks in the mind. gonna switch it to the equal tempered one. The other one again. Yeah, it's more fluid.
It is.
And usually, like, especially with singers, you know, like I feel like naturally singers feel more comfortable with this because
Absolutely. Their voice naturally wants to hit the ratio of
Exactly.
the note above the one that they're singing, not an approximation of that.
exactly,
Which
yeah.
is why you hear, for when I'm talking to people who primarily listen to Western music, the way that I describe kind of what we're talking about now is I say, if you ever listen to a barbershop quartet, they sing justly.
Totally,
Because they're all singers. There's no constraints. They're not playing to a piano. And I tell them usually, if someone were to play the same chord on the piano that they were singing, it would sound completely out of tune.
No, exactly.
You know?
And even violin players, like many fretless instruments, have that naturally as well because you're following with fretless instruments, because you're not restrained to frets. Basically, you're using your ear a lot to hit the right note. And actually, you know, like what I was describing as the ascending and descending before, it's something that happened naturally.
Yeah.
When players like when they went up, they hit that note like unintentionally, kind of. Then going down, they hit it back. It's not like as academic as it's not like some people stood there with a ruler, you know. It's just like a practice that people kept doing until it became standardized.
It's like patterns of speech. It's like we have natural rhythms that we speak in English that are different than the natural rhythms that you and I speak in Arabic.
Exactly.
Do you know what I mean? It's the same way. Like the way that we ascend in melodically and even the melodies in our voice would change if we start speaking Arabic.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, and you know what's actually really interesting about that is that has been researched a bit, and I referenced it in one of my assignments at uni, is how rhythmic cells are present in different languages and how they are used more often than not in the cultures that in the same music that culture produces. So, for example, like Spanish music or Mexican music, they like if you say a standard Spanish phrase like me casa, right? Su casa. The emphasis is always on that middle syllable. It's not like me casa.
Yeah.
It's not me casa. It's me casa, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Or
it's a certain tone syllable.
and that
the way
da
the
da
syllables.
da is really common
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
Spanish music.
It is.
Da 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 da
No,
da.
you know, that brings me to another point I wanted to talk about is like, you know, when you speak about the odd rhythms, like the non-4/4 rhythms,
Yeah.
that mostly comes from speech. And the reason why some people perceive it very fluidly, let's say, those rhythm in certain part of the world, is just that because it matches their speeding cadence, kind of, or poetry.
Well, that's kind of what I was alluding to before when I mentioned the 4/4 thing, because I was going to say that in a lot of Greek, Balkans, Turkish, Middle Eastern music, that compound time is much more common, and it doesn't. And compound time would be something like 6/8 or 9/8, or even 3/8 or 12/8 in English. But that weird divisions of those are kind of common in music from those areas, like something like a 7/8.
Yeah, depends where you go in the world. Yeah.
Pardon?
Like each
Depends
area
where
of
you
the
go.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, absolutely. But the point being that I think a lot of that is informed by speech, and that it being part of the cultural or musical milieu means that we find it quite danceable. Actually,
Exactly.
I actually think Middle Eastern music is so easy to dance to. I'm quite biased because I grew up listening to that. I grew up dancing like dabke, for example.
Yeah.
Dabke is more folk style music than
Yeah.
what classical musicians would play. But I think that it still rings true that it's informed by the speech and it's informed by the geography and the scales and the things that you do and listen to in that place. And I find it so easy to dance to. And I think actually people generally find it pretty easy to dance to.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, no, dabke is really how to say, it's very accessible as well, you know, like, because also if you look at it geographically, Lebanon is pretty Mediterranean.
Yeah, very.
So it is music that's like, it obviously has lots of influences from other parts of the Middle East, but also like from Europe or Eastern Europe to
North
lots of
Africa to Southern Europe.
Exactly, yeah. Just like I was saying, like we have a version of the bouzouki that looks exactly like the bouzouki but a bit different. So like usually musically, like each area you go to, there's always a bit of influence from around it.
Absolutely.
Like Iraqi music is a lot more similar to Iranian music
Absolutely.
than it is. Well, like our like Lebanese music, a lot of it is more like it has some influences from Greek music and other, you know, like that are more like similar to the area. Um, so yeah, it's very complex, you know, and the Arab world is very big.
Yeah,
Also,
it's not a homogenous thing.
yeah,
And I
it's
think
bigger than
people don't
Europe,
understand
you know.
that.
If like
It's massive.
yeah,
Like like if we talk about food, I mean, you might be able to speak a bit more to this than I would, but I try and explain Lebanese culture or cuisine as being kind of like that nexus between Mediterranean food and Middle Eastern food.
yeah,
Like I feel personally like our food culture is more similar to southern Italy or Greece than it is to like Saudi Arabia. You know, and it's not to say that we're not Arab or that we're not Saudi Arabia, like that we don't have a connection to that, because we clearly do. But I think that our food culture is born of like seafood and fresh veggies and stuff like that. And
it's very
simple-
geographical as well.
Absolutely.
It depends on. I mean, we're by the sea, so we have fish, and the climate in Lebanon is very good for growing tomatoes and lots of fresh veggies. So there's a big like fresh fruit culture. Well, in other countries, I was talking to this with Marwa, my flatmate, because she's from Egypt, and it's like, you know, like Egyptian cuisine relies a lot more on beans and stuff like this because it's the climate
suits that.
you know.
Absolutely.
And a lot of it is like that. And there's a big gap, for example, between the climate in central Egypt, let's say, and the Mediterranean.
I was just
It's
going
very
to say,
different.
yeah, like northern Egypt would be very similar to Lebanon in a lot of ways compared to southern Egypt, which I imagine would be quite different.
Exactly, yeah. And those borders we have in the Middle East are very artificial, you know.
Absolutely.
And like North Lebanon has always been very close to Homs in Syria. Like their culture has always been more similar, yeah. But now when they drew the Lebanese borders, it became more of a like they got like forced to be considered Lebanese, you know. So
yeah, whereas Mont Liban is very different than like the other side of the same mountain.
Totally, yeah.
You know,
yeah.
Like my dad comes from Deir Lahmar and my mum comes from Jounieh, so very different parts of Lebanon. Even within Lebanon, food culture is different. I think my mum was saying something like she never really had kishik growing up. Because the climate that you need to make kishik is a dried yogurt, preserved yogurt kind of thing with burghul. Sorry, for them, not for you.
Yeah.
And you really need dry heat to make kishik, whereas there's no dry heat in the coast of Lebanon.
Not in Beirut.
It's
Good
the
luck
opposite.
if you want dry heat.
You just curdle the milk. Do you want to pass it to you? I can make it a bit closer for you if you like. You're all good. So yeah, even the cold, and I mean, my dad would not have really eaten much fish growing up, whereas mum would have almost exclusively eaten fish. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see that, you know, we think about Lebanon, it's not just one place. Think about the Middle East, it's not a homogenous thing. Even within countries, it's not.
Even if you look at the folk music in Lebanon, there's actually an interesting podcast online that talks about it. It's like the folk music, it's a good example in Lebanon because it's a very diverse country, even though it's tiny. But if you go to the Bekaa Valley, where Deir al-Ahmar is, for example, the folk music, that's where Dabka thrives.
Big time.
And here, like, they have lots of musical cultures because they have more history with like Bedouins and people who migrated from areas like close to Iraq and stuff. So there are many, like the Ateba, you know what we know of Ateba in Lebanese music. Ateba, it's like a vocal improvisation, but usually that talks about like misery.
Yeah, okay.
And apparently it's something that started, it's inspired by an Iraqi musical form. And they sing it in the Bekaa, it's popular in the Bekaa specifically. Where like the Mount Lebanon folklore is very different, you know? It's more like, it's more Syriac inspired because like, the ancestry of Lebanese people in the mountains comes from like Syriac descent, where like up until the 20th century there were people in mountains of Lebanon not speaking Arabic, speaking Syriac. So
well, I think Shadda was the last place in the world to stop speaking.
Exactly, yeah.
And you can still hear the Syriac accent in the Arabic.
It's more emphasized. But all of the Lebanese accent is very Syriac.
Yes, compared to the rest of the Middle East.
Yeah.
But I think it's really pronounced in Shadda, where, for example, like we would say khiyar for cucumber, whereas they say khior, or aloho.
Yeah. The letter O, like the A is O in Syriac, and in northern Lebanon they do the same. But yeah, that's as we were saying before about rhythm and language. Like that's why like their music in the north.
Is inspired by
Yeah.
that.
Even we see that in the Maronite church, the tretil, you know,
Yes.
the
That's
etc.
more Syriac.
Yeah, that's more Syriac and originally, you know, like if you look at the history of the Christian chants in the Middle East, it's like especially the Maronite Church because there's a famous saint in before the year 500, I forgot, I think year 300 or something, called Marifrem, and he's known for many of the tretil we sing in church.
Okay.
And basically he took folk music because he saw like people love to dance and stuff, so he took folk music and turned it into tretil.
Oh wow.
So the tretil we have used to be folk music back then.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And that was in a sense kind of preserve that music really.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I think it's the only way this music got preserved. You know, I mean, dabke is similar. If you think about it, like when you listen to some dabke songs, like like this could be a tertile if it was a bit more sober. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's very like in Mount Lebanon, you know, melodies they usually use the first half of the scale.
Okay.
So they don't modulate that much, you know, and it's very it's like
Almost more mathematical in a Western sense
yeah,
than it
no,
is.
it's less yeah, it's more rhythmical, I would say, not mathematical. It's more like based on the rhythm. While like for example some more like in the Bekaa Valley, you know, the stuff that come from Iraq, it's more like free with rhythm or
Yeah,
like
yes.
yeah.
That reminds me actually that now that you mentioned that, my dad told me when I was a kid, like we've been in this part of Lebanon for a long time, but multiple generations back we came from Iraq, and that's why we were called Al Fakhri, because they came from a town called Fakhr. So these were the
Probably,
people
yeah.
from Fakhr.
Yeah, there was lots of
Absolutely.
migration from Iraq. Like, I actually don't know historically where it fits. I should actually look it up. But yeah, like there's a big, especially the Bekaa Valley, you know, because your dad said he's you said your dad's from Dir Al Ahmar originally.
Well, he's from Tadeh, which is next to Dar Lahmar.
Yeah, but that's
no one
the-
knows
the-
Tadeh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it, a lot of people came from Iraq. Like there was a big exile,
Absolutely.
and you know it's part of our Lebanese heritage. Like those people brought amazing things from them, from
Absolutely.
Iraq, and
Well, that's how it. I mean, that's how. For all of time, cultures have mixed, and people have moved from one part to the other. And well, this is what we do, and then people there are kind of like, that's really interesting, or that's very different, or cool, we like this and we don't like that, and you know what I mean. Like I said, the result of that is that something as basic as kishik. I mean, they just didn't do it that
Yeah.
much on the coast, and they do it all the time because you need to.
yeah.
And when you're talking about, sorry, I forgot the name of the misery chanting.
Ateba.
Ateba, it makes me think about how even just like it was so common for my dad to tell me things like where I came from in Lebanon. It wasn't like people had to think about what they were going to eat during the winter. They had to prepare for winter because it was harsh. Like there was meters of snow. Nothing could grow outside.
Yeah.
So all of their winter meals were some form of preserved food from
Moone,
summer.
yeah.
You know?
We call it moone.
That's what kishik is. It's preserved yogurt from when times were good. And so I think that element of misery chanting, it's almost like this is our life. Like not that their lives were miserable. I'm sure that wasn't great, but it's more like hardship,
Yeah, no,
You know?
definitely. There was lots of hardship.
surviving.
Yeah, survive. Yeah, I mean back then, you know, life standard there was no Centrelink back then. I'm sure.
Definitely.
There's still no Centrelink in Lebanon.
There's barely any settling
Yeah,
there
yeah.
now.
But yeah, no, that's what's like really amazing about like Maqam music in general is because like now all the area we were talking about is literally like smaller than Melbourne. Like all
Yeah.
those different cultures are like to drive from my house in Beirut all the way across the mountain to the Bekaa Valley, that's an hour and a half. And there are all those three different cultures within this small. So it's crazy to think in the Middle East like each like there are so many different culture within such a small space because it's such an ancient culture, and and because of all like the migrations and all the historical events that happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got almost every major civilization within 1,000 kilometers having their way in Lebanon. You know, from you've got the ancient Phoenicians and the Canaanites, and then Alexander the Great came through. And then we spoke Greek in Lebanon for a long time. And the Romans came in, and then the Umayyads, and then different caliphates, and then eventually the Ottomans were there. And then French were there, and we still speak French in Lebanon. All these people have had their say in the architecture, in the art,
exactly, yeah,
in the build. Yeah,
even the language. Like Lebanese language is interesting because like there's so many Turkish words we use as well.
Heaps.
Yeah,
there's tons.
Lots of Syriac words. Like it shows like the history as well, like
and
language
speak. I mean, it's common. It's a common thing. Hi, kifak sava.
Yeah, exactly.
English, Arabic, and then French all in one sentence. And then some of the Arabic words you borrowed from Turkish, and some of them are Syriac. And I mean, it's interesting being from Lebanon in the sense that I think you could have accept from a young age. You're just sort of speaking like a mixture. It's I was going to say khalta. It's just a mixture of everything. It's just like, oh, you got that word. That word works. Like we'll just use that word.
Yeah, exactly. And when you speak about like the slang we speak, like we always say, like use like conjugate English words in an Arabic way. Like for example, batrapet. That's a funny one. Batrapet means I had a bad trip. Like usually, like we would say it like, let's say like you were driving and then the police came. You're like, shit, batrapet.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
It goes the other way as well. Because my auntie, she came in the 70s, and she has her own version of Lebanese English that no one else speaks. And she'll see her kid, and like we were visiting, and she'll look at her kids like, I'm like, are you gonna boosing auntie?
Are you gonna come boos auntie?
Yeah, you know what I mean? She'd be like boosing. The boos is like to kiss, and ing obviously the verb like conjugation in English. So she would do it the other way as well, which is kind of crazy.
I do it sometimes, like just for comic effect. Yeah, sometimes it's fun, especially when the person understands a bit of Arabic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know about you. We've talked for a while now.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you just play for a bit.
No,
is that okay?
Yeah.
If there's anything that you particularly feel like playing, please do. I would love to hear Ya Banat Iskandariya only because I love the way that you play it. But if there's anything else that you'd like to play,
no, of course. I can play a Banat Iskandariya, and then maybe I can go through some scales. Like,
sure.
Like, play like maybe improvise in a few different scales.
Do you want to get comfy? Do you want to come?
No, I'm comfortable.
I might just for this. I might just move the camera angle to be more on you,
and
good. Then I'll get out of the way.
So yeah, that was it.
Beautiful.
Usually it's known as a Turkish song called Üsküdar.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then we changed it to Yabanat Skandari, I think, in Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but you know what's funny as well? There's a Muslim chant, like they use this melody for Muslim chant, and recently I discovered there's like an Orthodox Christian chant where they turned that melody into like a tertile,
a hymn.
hymn, yeah, which is funny. Now I'm gonna play. There's a scale I really like. It's called Saba. I like it because it really emphasizes how weird Arabic scales can be. Because this scale has like many microtones in it, and it doesn't finish on the octave. It finishes half a tone below the octave.
Oh wow.
So
Can you give us a?
yeah, I'll just play like the scale itself.
That's wild.
Yeah. It's also common in Greek music, this scale. So yeah, that was Saba. I really like the scale. It's very sad and misery.
It's very evocative.
Yeah.
I loved when you were doing a lot of the descending, kind of going down the scale.
Mm-hmm.
There was some really interesting tension.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it's a very tense scale. Should we do something more?
Yeah,
Or
for sure.
maybe I can do like a composition now.
One of your own?
Yeah. No, not one of my own. I'll keep it short because my music is a lot more electronic based. So But that's a samai, yeah. This one is called the samai. Actually, the example I gave before when I was talking about heterophony uh, was part of this song. Samai is like a 10/8 melodic composition.
Cool.
And it's nice because it usually modulates to different. It has different sections and different scales and stuff.
All right, great.
So this one is the scale is called Bayati, which is minor, but the second is half flat, kind of.
beautiful.
Thank you.
That's amazing. It's really mesmerizing to watch you play.
Oh, thank you.
So not only just striking the strings and seeing you do the actual
Mhm.
playing the instrument, but you're so efficient with handling the mandals as
Yeah.
well. Doing that mid. I mean, harp players are like that as well, I guess, to some degree. But there's a specific precision at play here that I guess
Yeah.
I can really appreciate.
You have to. You know what's hard is like your right hand has to keep moving. Your left hand
Exactly.
has to be. Also, because it's precise. You know, you have to move three at a time.
Exactly.
or-
Yeah.
But yeah, that piece we call it a samai. It's like
Yeah.
a classical form.
Yep.
Usually, some of the samais also have like a 6/8 part, but most of samais are like 10/8,
Mhm.
and from part to the other, usually there are like different scale, like it modulates to different scales, etc. And then it resolves to the like to the
original
main scale at the end. Yeah.
So watching you do that, there's a bunch of things I wanted to ask you about. Firstly, was we sort of talked about maqams, and we've talked about time signatures: 10/8, 6/8, 4/4. Within the Western world, there is a kind of sense that, let's say, jazz music is very in the pocket on time. You know, that everything is supposed to be where it's supposed to be. Whereas classical music has this sort of more of a ebbs and flows nature to tempo.
Yeah.
Rather than saying it has to be at 110, they might say allegro. It's not specifically 110. It's more that it's at this pace, roughly. Two questions. Firstly, is the sense of time in Middle Eastern music strict, or has it got a flow to it?
Look, it has a flow. But there are many ways to play around with it. You know, like sometimes you would like there's lots of syncopation where, or like parts where like the rhythm itself slows down. You know, but I mean, how to say? Especially if you're playing in a group, like there needs to be some kind of sync between synchronicity. But I mean, especially the singer, you know, like the singers and many of the legato instruments, like the violin and stuff. Many of the times they would like resolve a bit. There's more this flow you see with them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
But no, it is like, especially also it depends on the style of music.
Sure.
Like
Sorry.
tarab.
Yep.
Tarab, which is like style of classical music. There's lots of play around the rhythm.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But like some more, like what I just did, like an instrumental classical piece, it would be a bit more strict with them, except at the end because it speeds up.
Yep.
And usually, like when something speeds up, it's kind of a big deal because, like you know how I was talking about ornamenting something. So if something is slow, means there's more space for ornamentation. While if something is fast, it's like the ornamentation you'll do are very different, you know, and you'll do different effects. So the playing style is very different as well. So yeah, there's that to take into account as well.
Okay, so broadly speaking, I'm hearing that there is a flow within the time, but let's say the more people that are involved, the more that people have to sort of have a sense of there's a place of the tempo, then that pulse is consistent.
Yeah.
Okay.
But usually with vocals, because like there are some rules, like there are some letters you can extend many beats if you want
Vowels,
as
for
well.
example, versus
Yeah. Like the hard, because in Arabic we have soft vowels and hard vowels.
yeah.
So it's the hard vowels that you can extend. The soft ones you can't. But for example, there's a song by Sabah where she goes like, Ya Habibi. You see, like it's like she's purposely dragging to add a more like erotic effect a bit to her song, and it works well, you know. And there's a lot you can play, you know, with that, like getting out of the beat, then going back in, you know.
Sliding in.
Yeah, and sometimes you can. It's very common in Arabic music. Let's say you said like the lyrics, but then like in the next sentence you say again like a bit of the previous sentence, you know, to ease into the second one.
Okay.
So there's more freedom. It's not like you know what I mean. Like the song can be longer if you want to make it longer.
Absolutely.
Like the singer can like milk, if you want to use that word. Like can milk, you know, a sentence if they're feeling inspired about it.
Milham Barakat, I think, was really good at doing that. You know, he would sort of, I think the orchestra that he was playing with had that sense of, okay, things like we're not doing it in this exact way. He might sort of guide the orchestra a bit more. The other question I had with regards to tempo was more about rhythm. I was hearing you're playing in compound time, and I was hearing you play like duplets and stuff like that in amongst what would otherwise be triplets. Are they strict as well? Like if you're doing like a da da da, is that melody, that main melody had like a da 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 sort of thing? Is that there's no other way to ask this question. Like this in
Are there
some
rules, yeah.
well so for again to reference jazz, a quarter note is typically swung. Do you know what I mean? It has a da 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 like da 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 da.
Yeah.
But they would just write that da 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 da, but it would actually be da 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 da. Da. Is that an element of Middle Eastern music in the sense that like the way that you might, that it's not so quantized, it's not so strict to a grid? You're saying singers can elongate specific rhythms?
No, I mean, like in theory, other instruments can, but it's just a bit harder when it's plucked, you know, because it's like you can less.
It happens at a time.
No, but I mean, look, especially when you're ornamenting, what's important is that you end at the right time.
Okay.
Like you come back on the one.
Yeah.
Like before, you can do whatever you want, but it has to resolve at the right time. But you have lots of freedom in what you do in between those bits, you know, or like those empty spots in a composition.
Yeah.
Like you really can do anything. You know what I mean?
I feel like Arabic. So when I do calligraphy, one of the main things that was emphasized to me was this concept of negative space, right? Which I think the musical equivalent is silence.
For sure, yeah.
And that playing around with silence, do you feel like that's a major element of what you do?
Definitely. And again, as I said about the speed, because you have more silence when it's at a slow speed, you know, sometimes. And yeah, you can do a lot, you know. I mean, because you can't harmonize things, it's not traditional to harmonize things, but you can add melodies in between. Yeah. And you can do a lot. And I like how you compared it to calligraphy, because it's a lot. Like sometimes I like to compare even the whole maqams, you know, like Arabic architecture, how it's like shapes going into each other. Yeah, and for me, that's how maqams are. Because all maqams are related to each other in some ways, you know, like they have like some maqams are more common to modulate from another maqam, etc. Like some of them are closer from each other, you know. Sometimes you would want to modulate to this maqam to access another maqam that's like closer to this maqam.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Passing maqam.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of that, you know, like but yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and also that freedom comes like you start coming up with. Or let's say like the ornaments you come up with are very inspired by what you listen to and what you learned, like what pieces you learned. Like my teacher, he was a pro. I mean, I did a lot of learning by myself, but I did consult some people on the way just not to get bad habits, you know.
Sure.
And you know, sometimes just by doing an improv, your teacher could tell what songs you know.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Because it's referential.
Yeah, because you're using like a library of sounds that you're, like you have a library of sounds or muscle memory that's, you know, finding its way around other things. So it's important. And sometimes, you know, like when you listen to a lot of it, and because in the beginning I remember there was an issue, like how do I know when I can improvise, when I cannot improvise, etc. But the more you listen, especially like if you listen to the same recording by different artists, like each artist, let's say, explores a different space where they can add elements of improvisation, and it really opens your mind, you know, the more you listen, and you get to the point where like when you listen to a melody, you start imagining like, I can fit an improv here, and that's how you add your own element into a composition. Like whoever wrote this piece, you know, like even sometimes I like to, like whenever I play like Western songs and I Arabize them, a common thing I do is like I add those improvs, you know, in places where like I kind of shift the melody by making it more Arabic, like making modulations where there shouldn't be modulations.
Is there a song that like I might know or someone might know that you could?
Actually, recently I had fun with a friend. We did "Toxic" by Britney Spears.
That is one of my favorite songs.
Let me see. this anyway.
That's fantastic. I love that. And a
Yeah.
great song too,
Yeah.
in its own right.
Or also another more clear example I can give is Jingle Bells, for
Yep,
example.
Go for it.
Like, because with ornaments, you know, like.
Mhm.
Something like this. You
That's
see what I mean? It's
fantastic.
like
Yeah,
you add
it's great.
ornaments. Yeah. So yeah, it's like that. Like whenever you have space, you can add notes, you can play with rhythms, and even do some like. You see, like that's a bend to a note that's not within the scale,
Mhm.
but that's a common like.
Middle Eastern musical trope.
Yeah, like if you're doing a major on the fourth, like
Yeah.
you see.
How many are you pulling across there? Is that
Here three to make it
Okay,
more
four.
obvious,
Yeah, okay.
but sometimes I would do like 2 or 1. It's
Yeah.
a bit like
Very subtle.
that's too much. So yeah, it's like you know, and that's one of the elements that makes something very Arabic. Is like you're adding ornaments, like a lot of them. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, that feels really authentic. It doesn't feel shoehorned or anything, because the original intention of Middle Eastern music is to take a melody and add ornaments to it.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's any different to use a Western melody. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
feels like when you're doing it, it's like you hear it, and I hear Toxic, and I hear Jingle Bells, and I hear it done, and it sounds Middle Eastern, and it's very authentic.
But you know, for me, what's the difference is that the composition itself is not a maqam. You
Yeah,
know,
of
for
course.
example, like Jingle Bells, when I go like, that's an arpeggio, like a chord.
Mhm.
You know, but that's something that a maqam, it's an approach a maqam would not do. Like
Would
if
not
I
take.
was composing it traditionally, I would not do that interval. You know, because it's not very maqam-ish.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. That previous thing that you played, was it Sama'at? What was it called?
Samai.
Samai. Were you doing it in the way that we were talking about with regards to there was a main melody that I heard you play multiple times,
Yeah.
and everything around that was improv that you are guided via the maqam, or were you playing a composition in 4 minutes of length or something like that?
No, I mean it has again like it has some notes that are typical. Like if I played it just the composition as it is, it will be very boring.
Mm-hmm.
Because also like composers who compose traditional Arabic music or maqam music would take into account like
Places for
that
people
you
to
yeah.
improvise.
So it's taken into account, you know what I mean? And it would sound very boring if I didn't choose that. It's just a bit harder when I'm playing something on my own, just because I need to keep referencing the melody. So it's hard to go very crazy if no one's holding the main melody as
course.
well. But I mean, you can still do like little things. But if I was playing with a group, I can go crazy.
Go crazy.
And it's funny because when you play with people, like we look at each other, you know, like if like the old player did something cool, I'd be like, hey,
Oh, yeah.
you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's like it's very communicative. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that communication is the number one way that I describe what it feels like to play music with people. When it feels proper. You know, like I was very, very fortunate to be able to join one of your Christmas jams a couple of years ago, and it felt like people were kind of communicating. You know, we were playing a very bastardized style of different things being mixed.
Yeah.
But people were enjoying it, and I was certainly enjoying playing with you guys. And it was like, you know, keep your eyes open and keep your ears open, and let's see what we're all doing. And oh yeah, that was sick, well done. And that's really it's fun.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
It's fun. I think ultimately playing music should be fun. You know,
No, I agree.
even
yeah.
if you're describing something and it's very emotional and it's very close to your heart, the process of doing that with other musicians is enjoyable. It's fun.
It is, yeah. It's different, you know. It's like any activity, you know. Sometimes it's fun to be on your own, like spend time on your own, but like it's always like one of the things that keeps me going with music. It's like all the joy as well, like when you share it with people,
Yeah.
like when it makes people happy, like it's a big part of music as well.
Well, making people happy, people that you're playing with, or the audience.
Everyone,
That's what I thought.
you know, everyone. It's like we're in this together. We're sharing an experience, but also it's not only. It's not like we're nerding on video games, you know, while everyone's having fun. It's like we're doing music that people are like also enjoying.
how do you feel? Do you perform much for like Western Australian audiences?
Yeah.
What do you think is the typical reaction that you get from that? Is it genuinely curiosity, interest? That
Yeah.
was really interesting. Do you feel like people maybe they don't get the references that you're making, but do you still feel like the emotive quality is communicated?
I mean, yeah, sometimes music speaks for itself, you know what I mean? I mean, definitely it's a different way to perceive it. And sometimes, honestly, I prefer it because, like, I feel I mean, especially the older people from our community, you know, sometimes you feel they lost the touch with the art of this. Like, many people, because, you know, like, I have a theory that, like, I think traditionally music was seen as a trade, you know?
Mm.
As like someone fulfilling a purpose in society, you know, weddings and stuff. So I think, you know, sometimes like people view you as like, oh, like you're playing songs for us to sing along and to enjoy without any art appreciation,
Mhm.
you know. And at least, you know, like when I share the music with people who are not from that culture, you know, they see it as something new. It's like they see it for I mean, I want to use that word not in a pejorative way, but they have like innocent ears when it comes to this.
Sure.
It's like someone discovering something new, you know. Like so I feel they notice the details more, and because they don't have any like they don't relate to it in any way, you know, or maybe in stereotypical way from Hollywood, which I
Sure,
try to break, you know what I mean.
Of course.
But yeah, so I appreciate when people ask me questions, you know. It's like, what are these, especially when other musicians come and ask me questions. I always like to like share, as well as people who just like first time they listen to this instrument or something. It's always not. And again, music is I mean, we spoke about lots of academic things today,
Yeah.
but also music, you know, at its core is just to please the heart, you
Absolutely.
know.
And to please the ear.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like things that just decorate, like, you know, it decorates time. It makes everything much more enjoyable.
Yeah. It ornaments the silences.
Yeah, absolutely.
say.
Yeah, exactly. I do get a sense that audiences don't understand how much a part of the performance they are. You know, because people think, oh, I don't play music, I don't participate in music, but they love going to gigs, and it's not that, you know, whatever economic part of that is, you know, valuable for musicians and for everyone, but the fact that being there, witnessing it, and when I'm on stage, I will take into account like what the audience is doing. You know, are they with me? There'll be times where I'm on stage and it is like dead silent in the audience because everyone is right here with us on stage. You know, and other times where, you know, I hate saying this, man. We did this gig. I didn't know where the gig was going to be. As in, like, I assumed it was a regular kind of venue. Turns out it was basically just an RSL. It wasn't called an RSL. That was the issue. And so I'm here singing my heart out about breakups that I had years ago. And meanwhile, there's people on like pokey machines just like, yep. Another person was just like eating their Parma. And I was just like, oh.
That's the trade bit I was referring to. You know?
Exactly. And I was like, oh, this isn't what I'm really feeling like doing.
Yeah.
But, you know, they impacted the performance. I mean, you hate to say it as a musician because you just be like, okay, cool, I'm just going to do my own thing. But it's like, no, there's context here, you know?
You know, it's funny, when recording first got created in like late 19th century, early 20th, at the time, artists didn't really understand the concept of recording in a studio. So they would hire people to cheer for them and come there, even in the studio.
Really?
It was a thing. Like it was taken for granted in some way, you know? Like it's, you wouldn't do a studio recording unless there's a crowd of people with you, you know? And as you said, like people are an essential part of
the performance.
The performance, exactly.
It feels really removed. And I've basically only existed, well, not only, but mostly existed in the recording world, which is devoid of an audience to a degree. But the audience is like the barometer by which you judge your performance. You know, you're kind of like, how are they reacting to what I'm doing? Do they like it? Do they not like it? You know, should I push myself? Like, I don't know if you feel this way, but sometimes I'll be on stage and I'll be like, they're with me. I can push myself. You know, I can do the thing that I don't normally do because I feel like they're supporting me, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And also there's this thing, like one thing worth mentioning is that even in classical Arabic music, there's a lot more interaction with the audience than in Western classical music.
How's that?
Because people are expected to cheer, and like there's something we call tatib. Tatib is like, it's the same thing we use like when you eat akl tayyib, which means
Okay.
tasty food, you're like yum or like and people like
shahid.
yeah,
I'm
during
drooling.
exactly, yeah. So even during a musical performance that's very serious, if like a musician like played something that you enjoyed, you're like Allah or like
Yeah.
you know, it's very common
Yeah,
to do things.
Habibi.
It's like in like poetry slams when people do this. It's a bit
Okay.
like that. It's like you're saying just a quick thing that's not clapping, but like to show your appreciation.
People will do that sometimes in jazz solos, but you do feel like audiences aren't aware that they're allowed to do it, especially if they're not like a regularly jazz
Yeah,
attending audience. They'll kind of be like, you know, sort of struck or whatever, and then someone on stage will be like, "It's time to
Yeah.
clap now! Like they did something incredible. Like let's acknowledge that it was incredible."
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it's similar.
It is
Yeah.
similar, but like you're saying that it's less about clapping and more about like fantastic.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, good on you.
Yeah, and even in old recordings, they would hire someone to do this. Like whenever
okay.
they did the solo, it's like yes, salam. You know, in the old recordings, you would hear it.
Really?
Yeah.
Not so much anymore.
No, no. After, I mean, when music became more of an industry, you know, because before they didn't have the. I mean, a way to look at it is like, you know how we look at early pictures and people didn't really know how to pose.
They didn't smile.
They didn't smile. They just looked like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a bit like this was like people just recorded them practicing their music thing. And with time, I feel like people developed like ethics that came with recording and like music business in general. Yeah, stuff like yeah. So with time, it became much less standardized. You know.
Well, it's interesting that you say that they used to hire musicians to come in to clap and be an audience essentially, because we've lost that entirely, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
But I did see that Rage Against the Machine did that for their first record. Do you listen to any Rage Against the Machine?
The name is familiar, but I don't.
You might know like Bulls on Parade. Dead on, dead on.
Oh, yeah.
Dead on. They hired, well, not hired. Oh my god, they brought in family and friends and all that sort
They
of stuff.
hired their family.
They hired their family to come applaud us.
Yeah.
To come and sit on the rhythm section, all recorded everything together. Guitar, bass, and drums were all together. Maybe the vocals too. And there was the whole studio room was filled with people,
Yeah.
and they were just performing for them. And I think because they wanted that energy of everyone there, like their music is very grassroots, especially back then. And so I think they wanted that essence.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, this is getting beyond Middle Eastern music, but I love records, especially old ones, and some people do it now. Mac DeMarco did a little bit on one of his records, where people just talk to you in between songs. You know?
Yeah.
They just be like, and so that song was about, you know, or at the end of an album, they'd be like, well, thank you very much for listening to my album.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be like, why do we stop doing this? That's sick.
It's nice in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Also,
very
it keeps
wholesome.
record because I used to back in Lebanon. I used to work in a music archive, and a lot of what we knew at the time about the many of the artists and musicians was things that came from the recordings. For example, there's a violin. One of my favorite like old school Arabic violinists is called Sami Shawa, and in one of his recordings, the tayyibat, the guy who does the tatib says like Allah ya sahb al amara, which means like praise you, like sahb al amara literally translates to like owner of the building.
Yeah.
And that's how people figured out that he actually owned the studio. You know what I mean? It's little things like this, you know, like if you put it in a historical context, it's really tells you a lot, you know. Like now we don't think about the future, but in the future, that's what people will remember of us in case like there's any reason for them to remember us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I have to make sure I get someone like that saying, "Oh, King Matthew."
Yeah, oh, King Matthew, oh, owner of the microphone who is recording me. You know, it's like...
That'll be my everlasting memory.
Yeah, exactly.
If anyone has access to this.
Except now you can put delay on it and make it funny.
Yeah.
Back then it's like...
It was just, that's it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like referring to someone as like Abu Khalid or
Kulthum, yeah.
You know?
It's like nicknames, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, wow. Well, actually, that's who it is.
Yeah.
Like they're also known by their relationship to other people.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Yeah.
know?
No, that's an Arabic thing. Yeah.
Very, very.
Where I think traditionally we didn't have like family names. It's like son of whoever your father is, or.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. Very. I didn't know that actually about the Middle Eastern recording. I didn't know they used to work in an archive.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was so enriching, you know, like especially when the fact that like our musical history has been very repressed by its own people. You know,
Sure.
like I keep giving the example, like you would ask anyone in a Western country like who's a classical composer, they would say like Mozart, Bach. Like no one in the Arab world knows who's like a classical Arabic composer from the past, you know, because of the nationalism we're talking about. So that job really helped me discover like a big part of my culture that's really not present in our history books, and that's very undermined. And you know, itself being an oral, yeah, thanks. Itself being an oral tradition, a big part of it was like in the early recordings, like people could hear themselves for the first time, you know. And it's kind of like when you look at the very early recordings, that was the direct product of years and years of oral traditions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That first got recorded, so it
Mhm.
was in a very raw form before like all those institutes got formed. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Before it got very it became an industry.
Mhm.
So it was like you learn a lot about your past as a like your country's past, your culture's past, as well as yeah, many things. Like you understand, because the era we were interested in was like like 20s, like pre-20s basically. So from the invention of recording until like between the two world wars, because that's when shit started.
Really
Like,
hitting the fan.
yeah. And
So you're talking about like you're learning about your musical ancestry in a sense. I think what's interesting is in the calligraphy world, in the Arabic calligraphy world, you're like, in an official sense, I wouldn't say that I'm of this ilk at all because I just taught myself,
yeah.
and I'm not even that good. But the people who have officially studied calligraphy, they're like, okay, well, my master, and you can call him a calligrapher or her a calligrapher. Studied under this person who studied under that person. And I know some people in the classical, in the Western classical tradition do something similar. Like my teacher was Tim Topham, who was taught by this lady who was
Yeah.
taught, and they can trace their lineage back to Beethoven or Mozart,
Exactly,
or
yeah.
whatever it is. Are you saying that there's a similar thing that goes on within the oral tradition?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you would tell like it was an emphasis we had at the archive, like when basically writing information about people, it's like who taught them. So that, because again, especially with Arabic music, when you have ornaments, you know, when like different kinds of ornaments, so there's definitely influence. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So this influence can be regional. Like if you come from Syria, then you would play like ornaments differently than if you came from Egypt, for example. So that tells about your style, plus the teacher you had, like who taught you, whose composition you're influenced by. And I mean, some lucky bastards back then used to be part of families, you know, like musical families where
families.
like they were born with it, you know.
The
what
most
I mean?
famous one in Lebanon would be the Rahbani.
Yeah, that came later.
Yeah.
We had a very famous company that called Baida.
Yep.
That's before Rahbani's, like early recording era. They even had like a recording studio called Baida Phone. At the time, they recorded on the phonograph kind of thing. And they're like, I think the first people who opened the studio in like a Lebanese studio.
Yeah, right.
There was Elia Baida and Farjalla Baida. One of them is dead. The other is dead. I forgot who's who. But yeah, like if you listen to some of their old recordings, like they sang both folk and classical. They had really good voices, and
Beautiful.
and it's crazy because back then you saw like different artists from Egypt, Lebanon, like all over the Arab world. They used to play together. You know, it was like a unifying kind of music. While later it became more national, you know, like for example Fayrouz, like as much as all the respect she had, like I respect all the respect she has, but she really like a lot of what she did was taking Western songs and adding Arabic lyrics to them, as well as like she she encouraged this idea of turning folk into classical. So like Dal'oun, like she kind of bridged those two words, which made things more confusing. You know what I mean?
Do you think that was a bad thing because it's confusing, like for people outside understanding what's happening? Because it would seem that blending those two things isn't inherently bad.
I mean, it depends how you regard classical music. Like for me, classical, when I say something is classical, means like it's showing the peak of complexity of what a culture can achieve.
Sure.
So when you take those very basic like folk melodies and you add like Western orchestration to them, like it's really like it's as if you view your culture as being backwards, you know, like that's how I see it.
Okay.
It's like you're not respecting the extent of what your culture achieved. I mean, okay, it's good to get kids to like modernize those folk songs. You know what I mean? But it's really, and it kind of played with the idea that people had to modernize their culture by westernizing it. You know what I mean? Like it disregarded all the achievements that like Arabic classical music did in a way, and that's my issue with it. You know what I mean?
Fair.
Yeah.
Because it's not necessarily that you're against it changing in some sort of way. It's more that doing it by default, westernizing isn't really the appropriate way to
especially
do it.
when people like no one knows this music. Like I learned it because I got to work at an archive randomly. You know, it's not something we learn at school, or like even people studying music don't learn about this.
It's very odd.
Yeah, like it's a shame, you know, like it's such a rich culture, and those are people who wrote books about music, especially after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. You know, that there are people who formed like gave an identity to Arabic music that's beyond Ottoman. You know what I mean? So it was a big. We called that era the Nahda, which means like the Renaissance. It's the Arabic Renaissance back then. Yet we know nothing about it. No one knows anything about it. Well, it was kind of, I think, revolutionary on the world scene, not only in the Middle East. You know,
It was in 1918.
And before, like
around the descent of the Ottomans.
yeah, because that's when Arabs got more autonomy in the first place. Like even before that, you know, and that's like even late 19th century. Yeah, you see, like there's a lot that this era contributed to our musical heritage, but no, it's completely.
I've never heard any.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, no one knows. Even people in Lebanon don't know that, you know. And yeah, it's because also all like it's related to politics. A lot of it. It's because of all the political issues the region went through afterwards. Like there was no time to preserve, or like especially the fact that this was a music that was unifying most of the Arab world in a way, and that was not in the agenda of any politician because of the nationalism there was. Because like the Nahda era, there were musicians from like Egypt going to Syria to record. There was a studio in Baalbek in Lebanon that was famous, but that came later actually. But there's like the Baida phone studio, you know, people and like in some of the recordings you would have random artists from Egypt, Syria, Lebanon getting together to work on one classical kind of music. The same way like you would have like Russian classical music and French classical music. They're both like different in a way, but they have commonalities.
The
you know,
DNA is very similar.
the DNA is there, yeah, and that's how it was in the Middle East back then. But then they ultra nationalized music, you know, where like they made it very country specific. You know, the classic, where like they orchestrated regional folk music, and that's what they called classical music. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. So there's other thing. Because I don't usually plan any questions, but you did mention something that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned this years ago. You worked on some music for Civilization. So Civilization is a video game. It's a grand strategy game. You play as one of 16 or 20 beginning civilizations from like ancient era. You've played the game. You're into it, right?
Yeah. I like historic games usually.
And then you sort of guide the civilization through the world, and you discover the world as this civilization in different eras and stuff like that. Well, I guess the first thing is, how did that come about? How did you get to work on the Civ game?
Just first to clarify, the game is called Old World, but it's an offshoot. It's an offshoot of Civilization. It's the same developers, but it's just it's focused in the ancient era rather than all eras like the other games. No, I spoke there's a good friend of mine, Mina Shmele. He's a oud player and composer and producer, and we usually collaborate on many things. And he got in touch with Christopher Tin, who's the composer of those games, who was an amazing guy. Like I got to speak with him on Zoom. And he's very culturally sensitive, so we tried to make kind of music that's representing this era in the game.
Because there are Phoenicians in the...
No, not Phoenician. It's more like... No, actually, it's... Actually, there are Carthaginians, which are like kind of like Phoenicians. But actually, it was more about like pre-Arabic civilizations in the Middle East. That's where the game... So we tried, you know, to make music that's the most similar to how music was back then.
Okay.
Even though it's hard,
it's
very difficult because a lot of it we don't know how it was. But then music back then was extremely basic and repetitive, like at the time, it's a funny thing. We don't think about it now, but like actually playing a whole octave was a technological innovation at the time.
Sure, absolutely. No, it makes complete sense.
Because instruments were limited.
Well, think about all that's required to make this thing. This is a technological marvel.
Yeah.
And for the longest time ever, the pipe organ was the most advanced
Exactly,
technology
yeah.
that we'd ever made. So the idea of being able to accurately play something for a whole octave seems crazy to me.
Exactly. So but like we try to be as faithful as we can to that, being like making music that's authentic, just because now there's lots of the Hollywood like Hollywood arabesque music that's a bit cringy. Also, I just wanna talking about that, there's this scale they use in all like Hollywood movie when they wanna portray the Middle East.
Sure.
There's a scale called Hijaz, which goes like, now you're in the desert.
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to show that, like, that's the Hollywood, we call it the Hollywood Hijaz. That scale is called Hijaz. It's called Hollywood Hijaz because it's equal tempered. But, like, the traditional version of this would sound more something like this.
Which a Western audience, there's no way that they could hear that.
Yeah. It's not, I mean, they can hear it.
I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah.
I'm being very sarcastic.
Yeah. No, I get it. No, but it's
totally hear that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's obvious, but as well, because, in a Hollywood studio, like, they have a piano or this orchestra.
Well,
they're not going to bother even doing any, like, research into it. So they just play something that's the closest, And so, yeah, that's what we wanted to avoid, basically, with Christopher Tin. And we wanted to make something that's a bit, like, more authentic, and more...
well, there's also just more to Middle Eastern music than that.
Yeah. No, exactly,
Hijaz,
yeah.
And even if they did Hijaz, there's still a plethora of sounds that exist more so than that.
But also, how the way they play it is exactly what I did. Like, they go up. And, like, from a maqam perspective, you rarely do that, Like, just as a one-phrase thing, which is something they do a lot.
What would be a more typical Hijaz maqam?
No, I mean, you would play it like... You see, like, something more, like, rhythmically interesting than... Like, I would never do this in a solo, or, like, whatever I was trying to do. So, Hijaz, like, it's common to focus on the fourth. Let me just switch back to the... And, like, before you end, there's something also in the solos, we call it the afle, which is before you finish your phrase, you have to... Usually, like, you do, like, a small pause, and then you emphasize, like, that's the ending,
Okay. It's like a big cadence.
You see, like, you do, like, a tremolo or something before you end it.
Yeah. Heralding the end of the song.
And that's, like, another misconception they do in Hollywood, is because they try to imitate, like, Indian music. So they would finish with, like, something like... I'll just give you an example.
Please do.
So they do, like... It's like a drone at the end. You see what I mean? And they end like this. But that's something you would never hear in Arabic music.
Yeah, okay.
It would be more like... Something like this,
Yeah.
It's like... Dun, dun, dun. Like, the ending is usually very...
Abrupt,
yeah. But again, or like, they do like... Like... They would end it like this, like... You know what I mean? Just to make it more sad, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's very non-traditional.
It's kind of like eating... it's kind of like eating someone else make like baklava or cook something
It's like
Middle
Nutella,
Eastern.
baklava.
Hey?
It's like baklava with Nutella.
Yeah, you're kind of like... Yeah, we wouldn't really do that.
Yeah.
I get what you're going for. I understand that it codes as Middle Eastern, but it's not actually.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's what was the idea through Old World, like make something a bit authentic. Yeah.
Could you play like a melody? Do you remember any of the melodies that you writing for that?
A lot of it was improvised.
Okay.
It was on the Nai.
And it was very basic?
I mean, more basic than I would usually do, and a bit more repetitive, like less modulation. Like did some modulation to make it more interesting in a way.
Was it more like I would imagine music from that era. We're talking not prehistory, but burgeoning civilization.
Yeah, it's like
Was more was a
Bronze
more,
Age kind of
like
era.
rhythmic elements. Like there was more percussive things because that was an easier technology to produce. Or
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I'm not sure if it was more percussive back then, but I'd say melodies were less complex, more like sitting on the beat, you know. Again, but we can't tell because if they're following the language cadence, it's they might as well like really copy what they were doing. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like what they
rhythmically,
were saying.
languagely,
Yeah.
for sure.
So we can't really tell, but I'm sure like again, if they couldn't reach a whole octave, I doubt they can do polyrhythm. You know what I mean? Like, or syncopation.
One precedes the like.
Yeah.
It's like foundational knowledge. But I do think, when you listen to like West African music, for example, their tuning systems are so. That's why I asked you about this tuning system. One of the things I think that's really interesting about Middle Eastern music is that it's really so accessible for Western people. Do you know what I mean? Like it's its own thing and it's its rich history. But I think Western people, it's not so far removed that you don't understand the intention or they don't understand the emotive quality or whatever. Whereas I think having listened to some West African music and stuff like that, I think the sheer complexity of West African rhythms is so difficult for me to understand. And I think it's beautiful and I enjoy it. I'm not denigrating it as a musical genre at all, but more just the sense that like I get the sense that it's a lot of what's happening is going over my head, and that they are in tune to what's happening in a very authentic way. Whereas I think that is still likely somewhat the case with Middle Eastern music, but by and large, we're working within. I would say that the rules for Middle Eastern music are slightly expanded. Not that there's more constraints, but there's the playing field is a bit bigger.
Yeah.
But it's not like we're not playing on grass anymore.
Yeah, I think you're mostly referring to Levantine music, which is geographically very close to the West as well. But like again, if you go further, and like Iraqi music has its weird things as well, like there are weird things, but I think also like the music we mostly know are familiar with is the music that's, it originally comes from, how to say, it evolved was in an area with lots of migration, like Lebanon. As we said before, like there were lots of different people who came there. So it's kind of like sometimes, when lots of people get somewhere, it becomes a bit more digestible by everyone. Like the culture becomes more accessible. Yeah, melting pot, exactly. And I think that music reflects that a bit.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And I think also not only did all these civilizations conquer us and come into that region, but through all of that, there was trade all the way from East Asia,
the Silk Road,
and then the Silk Road, and it would go basically to Lebanon, and it would either go to Saida or Sur, which are cities in the south, and then continue on to North Africa, or it would go to Jounieh or Beirut, and then go into Europe.
Yeah.
And so you have all of these cultures and everything that they're bringing along the way from the very east of Asia, like China, through South Asia, like India, through Persia and all that sort of stuff, through the Middle East into Lebanon.
Yeah.
Which I think that transmission of knowledge and culture and musical styles makes it feel currently very accessible for me. Like
no, definitely,
we are the product of a lot of that.
No, definitely. And like talk about the Silk Road, it reminds me, it's like when people argue like who created tabbouleh first. I'm like, why don't you argue about things that are worth it? Like it
doesn't matter.
Yeah, probably someone like did like some elements of what we know as a tabbouleh, then a trader took it to a different place, and like it's all an exchange of culture. But also like musically, like the mizmar or some people call it the zurna. It's an instrument that exists all the way from China, all the way to like Eastern Europe, like Macedonia and countries like Eastern Europe, but getting close to the center. But what's funny? Like even in China, they call it sauna. and it's similar in Turkey. They call it zurna. They call it sauna in China, and but we use it for weddings. In China, they use it for funerals.
Oh, there you go.
You know, it's so funny how like
The same instrument, essentially.
yeah, same instrument.
Has a different
It
culture.
has a similar name, so you can tell that it's the same instrument that traveled around. But yeah, it has a different cultural purpose now with time, and often it's like that. You know, there are so
Absolutely.
many things that we find similarities in other cultures, but with time they got practiced in a different way, so they drifted.
Well, the culture had, like, let's say, a need for an instrument at a funeral in one place and another one, an instrument at a wedding. It's like, well, this one suits it, or this speaks to us in this sort of way. Like, to me, to hear a bismad, it's like a raucous. Like, you hear it, you can't not like, it's almost an obnoxious instrument.
Yeah.
In a way, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way you can play that quietly or subtly. You know, like, you're playing the bismad, it's like everyone's hearing you play the bismad.
Yeah, you love it or you hate it.
Yeah. And I think I actually think it kind of has a very synth like
It is
quality.
yeah.
Like, it's very like almost brassy.
Yeah.
You know?
No, it is a lot like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's funny with the mazmar because it's
Yeah.
very directional. So sometimes when like let's say you're standing here and I move around, it's almost like you're having an LFO,
effect.
you know, yeah, a phase effect, yeah, like
100%.
yeah.
100%. I think I would like to spend time recording some Middle Eastern instruments because it's well understood to some degree how to record drums and all this sort of stuff and trumpets and whatnot. I think it'd be interesting to understand the projection of a Qanoun, you know? Because things happen with trumpets that we don't like fully expect. For example, like I was in a recording session and a guy was playing the trumpet here, and you know your first instinct is just to put the thing right in front of it, right? But it didn't sound that good.
Yeah.
And so then he put it a meter back, and it sounded better. And then he put another meter back, and then it sounded better. And then he put it off axis,
Yeah.
and then it sounded incredible.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Okay, cool. I would love to." Like, you asked me about placing your pickup
Yeah.
on a suitable position. I'm like, I actually would love to spend some time doing that.
Yeah.
You
Just
know?
seeing where it's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding because as you said before, the people who made these instruments, there's a major element of genius in it. You know what I mean? Even the technology of a soundboard and having holes cut into it so that it can echo inside of it is genius.
No, definitely. Yeah.
You know? And as material technology gets better, then the instruments can change. As you know what I'm saying? So, which actually takes me back. Sorry, I'm going on a full. I'm almost like full ADHD right now.
No, it's
But
nice. Yeah.
when Zildjian came up with their specific alloy that they used for cymbals, then they used to make them. I think Zildjian began in the 13 or 1400s, and they make the exact same alloy still now
Oh yeah.
for
Okay.
cymbals because it just sings, and it's like 3 or 4 different metals, and it's in that specific combination and ratio that it sings the way that it does.
Yeah.
You know, isn't that incredible?
No,
Like,
it is. It's crazy.
In some ways, material technology has advanced us. In other ways, you're kind of like, we just nailed it.
Yeah.
500 years ago, we nailed it.
No, also it depends because I feel a big part of music is what the ear is used to.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So like even if in theory you get a better sound, maybe it's not as pleasing for the ear or it's not fitting. I mean, I'm sure many instruments were designed to play around each other, you know? So if you change one instrument too much, then
the context is different.
yeah, exactly. So and that's the beauty of art, you know? Like there's nothing right or wrong. It's just like things like there are different opinions, you know.
There's different
Different
contexts,
tastes,
different intentions, you know. And even my intention as a composer or songwriter, I should say, might be one thing, and then someone else hears something else. It's like, you know what, good for you. Like I'm of the belief that once I've released the song, it's not that I don't own it, because but I don't really feel like I own it anymore because suddenly it's like sure, the Red Hot Chili Peppers wrote whatever song, but I listen to it and I have this emotive reaction to that, and I feel like it's become part of who I am in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like they own the intellectual property to that, whatever, like the legal way they own it. But when I release the song, I don't feel. No, you're fine. I don't feel like it's mine in any way. Does that make sense to you? Yeah.
No, I kind of feel what you mean, yeah. Also, I have that thing where, like, after I finish a song, I don't want to listen to it anymore.
I go through waves where I'm like, this is the worst thing ever written by any human. And then, like, 6 months later, I'll hear it. For some reason, I'll hear it again and be like,
Oh,
Ah,
it's
I
actually
know.
good. Yeah,
I actually
yeah.
know what I was doing there. You know. So I got two questions have
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
come out of nowhere for me here. I wanted to ask, a guy that I knew that I worked at a recording studio with said the human ear craves perfection. Something that you said reminded me. You know, you craft the instrument for what the human ear craves. He said that the human ear craves perfection. Um, I have a certain opinion about that, but without sharing it first, I'd just like to hear. Do you have like a certain take on that?
Um, no, I don't know if I agree with that. Uh, like that person's probably a very technical jazzist. Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
Well, he's not jazz. So he does like post-hardcore, like metal,
Yeah, okay.
which I mean I think is very mathematical, very rigid in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah, again, like there's a point I brought up before, you know, like some of the music I listen to is like I love it, but it's too academic sometimes, and I think that's the closest you get to perfect music.
Sure.
I feel perfect music has its purpose. Like there's a way to enjoy it and things, and but what's perfect really? Like perfect can mean like not playing one note that's wrong, or perfect can mean like making composing the ultimate composition that makes you feel everything at once. It can mean so many different things.
So I'll say I also disagree. Not that I think that this person isn't
Yeah.
very smart or something like that.
If you're listening to us.
You know who you are.
Yeah.
What I think, the way that I think about perfection is like everything is tuned perfectly, right? Or
What is
everything
tuned perfectly?
exactly. It's like, and even if you were to play within the realm of Western music, like if my guitar is slightly out of tune, sometimes I feel like that, in a sense, has a beauty about it because it's a living instrument. It responds to the environment that it's in. It's detuned because of whatever. And then other times I think, wow, isn't the reason why we love drums and drummers is because they're not perfect and they do these things that are slightly out of time, and we actually want to hear that stuff. And you know, there'll be songs that I listen to where the drums are slightly behind on time and everything else is slightly ahead, and that tension is beautiful to listen to. Like I kind of feel like perfection is like the grid in Ableton.
Not even.
Do you know what I mean? But what I'm saying is like everything is exactly on the measure that it's supposed to, and I'm like, who cares? I don't want to listen to that all the time.
But again, that's perfection within a system.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that's for me the limitation where I'm struggling. Like, if you're making ambient music, what's the use of that grid? Or even I find it a bit. I mean, that's something also I spoke with some of the people who used to visit the archive. You know, about the way Western music evolved was that pretext of being perfect. You know, mathematically perfect. Like that idea of perfection is very imperialist, I think, you know, in a way, like wanting to achieve perfection through like rationalism in a way. I think it's very not thinking outside of the box enough, you know what I mean? It's and why are you seeking perfection within the Western system anyway? You know what I mean? It's like there are so many different systems. Who said that? Like for me, the Western system is the most imperfect because once you know all the chords, like what are you gonna do? You know what I mean? Like there's no place to. It's not an ongoing like atonality is one of the proofs that it's not a perfect system. You know.
I wouldn't call it a perfect system by any means, but I also wouldn't say that it's like solved. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think there's like a lot of music that's coming out that's been coming out that is genuinely interesting. Like even something to use like a rhythmic example, something like Jay Dilla and those like drunken drum beats. You know, it's interesting to listen to that, and that's playing within the Western music system. But I'm not trying to say that you think it's necessarily bad.
No, I know.
But I do think that there are lots.
I'm just challenging perfection. Like I agree. Of course, there's always areas that haven't been explored. But I mean, as a system, you know.
I wouldn't call it perfect. No.
Yeah, like it has lots of flows. Yeah.
I wouldn't call any system perfect. I think the system are designed because of the value structures that the culture that built them existed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's totally fine. And I actually think the concept of chords is kind of brilliant, and it doesn't really exist in many cultures. So that's quite a unique feature of Western music. But that doesn't mean that it's better or worse than others.
No, of course.
It's actually a limitation in a lot of ways. But that's okay. Like it's quite interesting to listen to.
No, I know. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I wasn't bashing the Western system.
No. I'm saying this broadly.
Yeah.
So don't worry about that. It's fine.
No, it's cool. No, for me, it's just that like like I'm challenging the idea of finding perfection within that system. You know,
Yeah.
that's what I meant. And like every system has its flaws and
Exactly.
pros. And that's why like perfection, I don't think it exists in anything, let alone music.
Exactly. That's why I'm like, I think being human is being imperfect
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
Also, I don't think your ear would look for that. Like, would you rather go watch a live band or a bunch of robots playing music?
I think that's exactly the point that I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
What we crave as humans is actually all of those little imperfections and all those
Mm.
little bits of spice that exist, whether it's in food, whether it's in music, whether it's in architecture, you know?
Yeah.
The other question that I had is what sort of like, do you listen to much Western music?
I do.
What
yeah,
sort of
I
stuff
do.
do you enjoy?
I mean, I even produce electronic music. You know.
Yeah,
what I
but
mean?
your electronic music is very influenced
Yeah, it's
by
very.
Middle Eastern.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, I did like what got me into electronic music was like when I was a bit younger. I used to love psytrance, for example.
Okay, yeah.
And like
yeah,
all
okay.
kind of tech. Like I still like to go clubbing sometimes.
Yeah.
I like that. I love jazz. I really like
Yep.
jazz.
Who do you listen to?
Jazz. I love Charles Mingus, for
Yeah,
example.
right.
Yeah.
I can so see that.
Yeah.
I can so see that.
Charles Mingus. Also, who do I like? The thing is, I'm very bad with names. You
Yeah,
know, it's
totally,
like.
that's totally fair. I'm just curious because I never really asked you what Western
And also,
music
what's
you
his
listen to.
name? Guy who composed Plum Blossom.
Oh, I don't know actually.
Uh,
Jamie, pull that up.
yeah,
I'll pull it up. One second.
yeah.
Plum Blossom.
Yeah. Song, maybe right? Jazz song.
My bad.
Does it say anything?
This is it says there's a it's like saying it's a Chinese song.
No, wait.
Jazz song. Yusuf Lateef.
Yeah, Yusuf Lateef.
Do you listen to Yusuf Kamal?
No, I don't think I do.
It's a combination of Yusuf Days and Kamal Williams.
Oh,
Yusuf
okay.
Kamal. It's really great jazz from UK.
Oh, okay.
I'll send
cool.
you a link. It's really good.
Yeah,
I'll
no,
definitely
please
listen
do.
to it.
Yeah. I like world
Um,
music in general as well.
What's that?
World music
Yeah,
in
for
general,
sure.
I appreciate it.
Is there any like so for me? I listen to a lot of like old school, traditional like Japanese music.
I love it. Yeah.
Have you seen that? I've forgotten the name right
Koto?
now. Is it the Koto, the one that's massive?
yeah.
It's basically like the original Qanoun.
Yeah,
I guess,
yeah,
in
yeah.
other ways. That is a beautiful instrument.
no,
I think they
it's
play it
lovely.
with a similar type of plectrum.
No, they put. I think it's more like a banjo thing where like you put a ring, but it
Yeah.
has a built. You don't put
Built-
a pick
yeah,
under it
okay,
like
yeah.
here. Yeah. Also, I love Western classical music,
Do you?
except the classical era. Like I love Baroque and I love Romantic and beyond.
But not classical.
For some reason,
Yeah.
it doesn't hit me. You know what I mean? It's like I mean I know like it's amazing music, but for me when I listen to actual the classical era, I think of rich people dancing in a court kind of. Well, like Baroque, I feel it's very powerful, and Romantic, it's very emotional, you know, in a way, and
Oh, absolutely.
I appreciate that. Even I love atonal music, for example, and experiment like contemporary and modern music.
Yeah. Okay. Really.
Mm.
I mean that makes a lot of sense because I think you would be stimulated by that,
Mm.
right? Do you enjoy it emotively as well, or is that?
Sometimes, like yeah, like I love Schoenberg, for example.
Yeah. See, that's real. That's quite challenging.
Yeah,
Schoenberg.
no, I
And
love it. You
he
know,
does-
I like the darkness it
He does the,
evokes.
does he do the 12 series? Well, he does the 12 tone music as well.
Yeah,
Where he tries to use every tone within an octave.
yeah, I find it
Very
limited
interesting.
though within the 12 tones.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing, right?
Yeah,
It's so interesting because you're probably like, bro, there's like 40 more of those.
exactly.
You
Yeah,
know?
that's the thing. I'm like, if you're making it atonal, and that's another thing. Like when I challenge like West, how do you call it? Like West centrism or whatever, or Eurocentrism. It's like you're calling it atonal, but you're still using instruments that are 12 tones.
Mhm.
So it shows that like what you consider atonal is so within your spectrum, you know? what
Yeah, I mean, I think to give them credit, I think they're maybe referring to atonal being like there's no key signature, but I think it
But
is
they're
not.
conditioned though.
But the condition is inherently Western.
Yeah,
It's inherently 12 tone equal temperament.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think some people, I mean, there's some modern music that does like the extended
Yeah, no,
technique stuff
definitely. Yeah.
that kind of goes beyond that. But Schoenberg specifically, I mean, he was also breaking the mold.
Definitely. No,
So-
I'm not undermining
Yeah.
him. All I'm saying is like, because even now, like when you tell people atonal, they would, like, they not
They wouldn't
often
think
would.
microtone.
Yeah, exactly. They often would not think beyond the 12.
Do you listen? I should have asked this ages ago. I should have asked you this personally ages ago. Do you listen to King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard?
No, I don't think so.
Have you heard of them?
No.
My friend. All right,
should
this is
send them
this
to-
is
yeah.
there's pre King Giz and now there's post King Giz.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So King Gizzard are a band from Brunswick that I think they're from Brunswick, who just did so well. They wrote such weird music. It was kind of like psych rock, but then it became so much more than that. And I'm not even the right person to describe this to you. Maybe at one point we'll listen to it together, or I can recommend an album. But why I'm bringing them up is because they just kept adding band members, and then it just said they just like had like 12 members in
Yeah.
the band, right? And they had 2 drummers, and then percussionists, and then multiple guitar and multiple bass, and then banjo players, and all this sort of stuff. And then they were all just freaks. They're all of them are just freaks at playing music. And so they just started going, okay, we're just gonna start writing like microtonal music,
Yeah.
and they
okay.
just started writing microtonal rock music and stuff like that.
Oh, that's
So
sick.
I
yeah.
think you would find it really
I would
interesting.
love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll find out and I'll send it to you.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That sounds great.
We'll have a listen.
Yeah. But even sometimes pop, like last month, when I learned "Toxic" by Britney
Yeah.
Spears, I'm like, that's such a good song. It's,
It's great.
Yeah.
And if you look at the chords for that, in the chorus, it's like it is spicy. It's like pure jazz, really.
Yeah, yeah.
It's actually jazz.
No, it's clever. I like clever music. Like whenever
Exactly.
there's a bit of effort put into it,
100%.
and the sole purpose was not just to make money. You know what I mean? Like
You can tell.
Yeah, you can easily tell.
100%. Actually, it's funny. That song was originally written for Madonna,
Oh, yeah?
and then she rejected it, and then Britney took. And when I listen to it, I'm thinking, Britney Spears is the only person, not the only person, but she has the right sex appeal for that song.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, it's a very sexy song.
yeah. No, they took the main riff from a Bollywood song.
That
bit, yeah.
That's not surprising at all.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, we haven't touched much on Indian music, and there is some brilliant music there.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's great. Yeah.
We've done this for just over 2 hours now.
Yeah.
I'm starting to hit a bit of a limit.
Yeah.
I could talk to you, but doing it in this sort of environment for multiple hours just gets more taxing than just doing it.
No,
okay.
for sure. Yeah.
But there's one last thing I wanted to
Yeah.
ask, which is we have a lot of like Aussies listening, and I know there's some friends from the UK that listen to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly their access to music is going to be YouTube and Spotify.
Yeah.
They don't have Ngami, which
Yeah.
has a lot of the music that you and I probably grew up listening to, and there's probably some of that stuff on Spotify as well. Actually, now that I think about it, but what would be like your intro to Middle Eastern music?
Definitely YouTube.
What would be your recommendations? What would you?
I mean, it depends what kind of music you want to listen to. If it's more classical music, I mean, I'm not gonna tell people from the beginning to listen to the like old gramophone recordings. I think a good way to get into it is to listen to Turkish classical music.
Okay.
If they're more into like the maqam, like exploiting the maqam, I
Mhm.
think Turkish music is a good way to ease into it.
Mm-hmm.
And in Turkey music, if you want more like relaxing music, Sufi music is great.
Mm-hmm.
Just type like Sufi Nai music, for example. I'm just kind of gonna give a short version of all the styles.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then like Dabke is like Lebanese folk. Then you have Maharaganat. Maharaganat is like Egyptian. It's kind of Egyptian folk, but they mix it with lots of EDM, so it's very dancey and very rave-ish kind
Mhm.
of. What else? You have belly dance music, also like Egyptian. That's a lot more like percussive.
It's also quite Arabian,
Hmm?
right? Belly dance music is quite like from
Yeah,
the
it's
actual
very-
Arab Peninsula.
I mean, I think it might have originated there, but I think like Egyptians exploited that music
They love it,
a
yeah.
lot, yeah. And if you want to listen to more like Tarab music, I'd say, for example, Kulthum. Tarab is like classical vocal music. Even Muwashahat, like there are the Muwashahat is another musical form that's very classical. Or Sayyid Darwish, like he exploited vocal music a lot, like he contributed to a lot of it. I think it's a good way to start, and maybe follow me on Spotify and other platforms as
Definitely.
Tarabit. It's more like electronic mixed with maqam music. So I kind of now with the new Ableton, they made it that different tuning systems are like built in.
Oh yeah,
But
Ableton
back-
12.
Yeah, which is a relief because when I first started using it, like in 2015, like trying to do it, I had to split the VST instruments into 12 different instruments,
Okay.
and was using an instrument rack. Like I split every note to a different version and I detuned them
Oh,
separately.
that's horrible.
So I can tell you, like my sessions took like at least 2 minutes to load, because I had like so many
So many
copies of the and so yeah, it was a bit like CPU heavy, but now it's all built in, which is
Great.
technology.
100%.
It's funny because something as basic as that, like you would think like it's available, but it's only now recently that people are starting to really consider like different tunings like something that people need. It's
Yeah,
like an
absolutely.
industry standard kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, it's been an industry standard in like the workstation pianos, like the pianos that they use to play in Lebanon and Egypt and stuff like that. They've had it for a number of years because, that same idea would be present in Japan, for example. They have their scales that aren't Western scales at all.
Yeah.
And so when Korg are making things, they're like, okay, well, we want to play Japanese music on this as well.
Exactly.
And they're probably thinking, oh, well, there's probably Middle Eastern music that has a similar purpose.
No, totally. But it's funny
But
that
Ableton didn't.
Yeah, like the production world, it's
Not at
really
all.
now. I mean, I don't blame them because a lot of it is, I'd say, more loop based or sample based. I mean, if you got Contact, you could done like they have a micro tuning thing, but it's different because sometimes when you glide between two notes, if one of them is microtonal, it used to do something weird.
Really?
Where it would glide the microtonal note by one whole step, so you end up having like weird like intervals,
like artifacting.
Yeah. But I mean, but no, it's becoming more like a standard.
In vogue.
Yeah.
Well, I think also just as a final point, I think the Middle Eastern culture, at least in Australia, I can't speak for the rest of the Western world, has become more in vogue, I think, and people are a bit more aware of it now.
Totally. I think there are many things that done that. Like I think a lot of it is the World Cup. Like the World Cup made Arabic culture cool again. Well, now the war brought us back a few steps, but yeah, also it's phases. I mean, it's sad to say this, but like I feel like 10 years ago, Indian music had the hype. Now it's Arabic music.
Yeah, exactly. I think sort of these waves are kind of like ways that the Western culture goes, oh, we didn't know about this, and then they learn about it and they go, cool, that's everything is going to be about this right now.
Yeah.
And then it sort of becomes part of the milieu.
Then we move on.
You know what I mean?
Also, because of all the migration waves, like you had the war in Syria, like you had war Iraq, Syria, everywhere, and like
those people go into the West and then bring their culture.
Exactly, yeah, a big part of it is that. I mean, hopefully it stays like that, because also because when I was a bit younger, I lived for a year in Australia, and at the time it was right after 9/11, so I experienced like lots of racism. I was still a kid. And no wonder, I mean, I ended up going back to Lebanon, but I feel like a whole generation grew up like being ashamed of their identity. While now, like at least this is giving them a space, and I heard that from many people, is like up until the last 2 years, they started being proud of their identity, you know what I mean? And that's why sometimes to bring back the topic we spoke about, like that nostalgia feeling, like even though at this point we're portraying like a cliche or stuck in time version of our culture, sometimes it might be needed to be able to go further, like at least set the basis there so people, I mean, we all come from different countries, we all listen to the same songs in the 70s. At least that unites, it serves a purpose as well.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It has a different purpose here now.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I reckon that's probably about time to call it.
Cool, yeah. It was great to have this.
Man, I loved having you. It's so sick. Like, this instrument is brilliant. You are brilliant at playing it. Every time I've seen you play, how do I say this? I feel like I'm witnessing someone who is truly like a master of their craft.
Oh, thanks. No, I'm far from a master, but I appreciate it.
Anyone who is a master says that because they know what they don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what you don't know because it seems the mountain of what you know seems so big.
Oh, thank you.
You know what I mean? But I love watching you play. I love talking to you. I've always loved talking to you. I remember telling you about this at the end of 2022 when I think I first met you. And you were like one of the first people I wanted to talk to. So I'm really glad that we finally got to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
No, thanks. Maybe we'll have a second.
We'll definitely do
episode.
more.
Yeah,
I think we'll do multiple because there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah. Of course.
And then there's also just not only within the Middle Eastern music, but just in general. I think just talking to you about your, because this was a good introduction. But in the future, I would like to actually talk to you about your personal music philosophy and how you go about creating your own music and stuff like that. That's a whole
for sure
thing.
Next time I'll teach you a rhythm so you can play along
I'd
with
love
me.
to. That'd be great.
Yeah.
I actually really want to get a oud at some point as well.
Yeah.
I think I've talked to you about that, but I need to do that at some point. The only other thing I need to say is I think on both my personal Instagram story and on my manvssynth one, I tried to entice people to come here by saying I'll teach them how to make my hummus recipe. So I'm just going to quickly say,
Yeah.
if you want to make hummus, and everyone should make hummus. Do you make your own hummus?
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, because I just feel like sometimes I'll try the store-bought stuff, and it never hits the spot.
No.
So all I'm going to say is this. All you need is some chickpeas. If you get the dried stuff,
Do you
just
want
make
background
sure.
music?
Hey, yeah, go
I'll
for
play
it.
some.
Oh, actually, just can you avoid doing the Hollywood Hijaz thing, please?
Yeah, no, not that. On the contrary, we're showing something authentic. I'll play the most microtone thing I have.
I actually have a hummus recipe on my laptop. Give me 1 second. My laptop's having a bit of a hard All right. We're going to start with, if you're going to use tin chickpeas, you're going to use 1 tin of chickpeas, 1/4 cup of tahini, a large clove of garlic, a fresh medium-sized lemon. You want to juice that. And then just a bit of salt as well. So if you're using tin chickpeas, I recommend ditching the water, putting fresh water and heating them up, cooking them, gets rid of that tin flavor, and it softens them up for the processing. Then ditch the water again, put the chickpeas in your blender. If you have a NutriBullet, use the NutriBullet. Add your other ingredients, blend it up. I put an ice cube in there. Do you put an ice cube in?
Yeah, actually, that's a secret.
It's a
thing,
good
yeah.
one. I would add an ice cube. You don't have to put olive oil inside, but you should put olive oil to garnish your hummus. And then my favorite garnish is also sumac.
Yeah.
What do you put?
No, I usually put some.
Some people put paprika. It's not that common. I don't like it personally.
Yeah, it's not traditional. Anyway.
It's not traditional.
And
Some
no,
people
the ice cube is important, especially for the texture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not too much tahini, I would say, because no, tahini is an ingredient, but sometimes I feel they overdo it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you tell me. I just made a batch.
Oh, nice.
You have to taste some,
Yeah.
and you tell me if it's too tahini for.
Yeah, on the next episode you'll get a full review
of my hummus.
That's hummus.
All right. Now make hummus. It's easy. It's better for you, and it's cheap.
And can I say just one extra thing? Something in Australia I notice is people put lots of. They tend to dip falafel in hummus.
Okay. It's not. Yeah.
It's weird. They're both the same ingredient, so it's like you're dipping chips in mashed potatoes. I think.
Yeah. It's so you know what I think it actually is like. I think it's like putting. Well, it's not actually like this. That's a really good example. But it's like British people who toast bread and then put chips inside of the bread, like packet chips,
We
not
do it
hot
in
chips.
Lebanon.
That's
not packet chips.
Yeah,
no,
which I
that's
think is weird.
That's weird. That's
No,
weird.
but like a chip sandwich, a hot chip sandwich is really good. I've tried to say this to Aussies as well, where I'm like, it's fine. You can put hummus with falafel. It's not like it's inherently wrong. It's just that tarator,
It's so much better.
it's what you want because falafel is so dry. Hummus isn't like wet enough for it. Whereas what you want is tarator, which is basically just hummus without the hummus. Sorry, without the chickpeas.
Yeah, it's tahini. Tahini was water and
Lemon
garlic
juice and
yeah.
You know
And
what I mean?
garlic, I think. Yeah. No.
It's just like a loose tahini, and you want that because it actually hydrates the falafel. How do you feel about like beetroot falafel and onion? Beetroot hummus and onion hummus and all that sort of stuff.
It can be good sometimes, but I don't like when things become a trend and they show up everywhere. I feel it's like in Lebanon, there's only one place that made it, and they became famous for it. And I think it's like this kind of thing. But like, I hate it when something becomes trendy and it appears everywhere. I'm like, just give me I want to have the basic hummus everywhere.
Yeah,
and
first.
if I want this thing, I'll go somewhere specific.
Yeah.
Be creative, rather than copy pasting everything.
It's funny. So I'm quite pro. Like for example, like halloumi. We wouldn't in Lebanon. Maybe now, but the way that my parents taught me, it wasn't common for us to just grill halloumi and eat it as a burger, for example, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I think that's actually a pretty good use of halloumi. I think it tastes really good to have a halloumi burger. And I think it's really cool that the Western world found halloumi and went, oh, we're going to do some different stuff with this, right?
Yeah, no, of course.
Whereas with hummus, I kind of go the other way. I'm like, hummus is perfect. It doesn't really need anything else, in my opinion.
No, but also I think because I feel in Australia it's considered a dip, while in Lebanon it's a dish.
Yeah.
You know, so I feel like people here use it as something to dip something in it.
Yep.
Well, for us it's not. I'm gonna order hummus and enjoy it as it is. You know, like so
Absolutely.
it has a different purpose. I would say.
We would make like one of my favorite sandwiches, just to spread a bunch of hummus and then get fresh tomatoes from the garden and slice them in there, and a little bit of oil, maybe cucumber if you're feeling like you want something crunchy,
extra, ooh,
you know?
yeah.
And then wrap that and then eat that. Also, one other thing, I had a chat with someone recently about A1 Bakery, and they were like, "Oh, I prefer this other place." I said, "That's fair enough, but the other place doesn't do sandwiches." And she was Australian, so she went, "I don't want to go to a Lebanese bakery for the sandwiches." Like I think she thought I was talking about like a tuna sandwich. I'm like, no. When we say sandwiches in Lebanon, we mean wraps.
Yeah.
Which is like tawur, which is like, kafta wrap or falafel wrap or something like that. And the word that we use for that is just sandwich.
Yeah, it is.
You know? But there's people who think that that's not a sandwich.
No, in Lebanon we
It's
call
wrong.
it sandwich franje. Franje is an old word to say French.
Mm-hmm.
So if like you say like I want a sandwich with like a French bread, you mean the sandwich like people think is a sandwich here.
Yeah, like a toasted thing.
Yeah. Well, khubz, like sandwich عادي, like a normal one, it would be the wrap one. Yeah, like that's the basic. Yeah.
The joke that I say to people is that Lebanese bread in Lebanon is just called bread.
Yeah, it's a good joke. No, actually we call it khubz, like Arabic bread.
Khubz, yeah.
No, khubz Arabic. We call it Arabic bread.
Khubz Arabic?
Yeah.
Well, then what's khubz?
Khubz is saying bread in general. But,
Yeah.
if you want to be precise.
Yeah, if you want to be precise. But
Yeah.
like if someone's like, can you go get me khubz? They're not like confused about which type of khubz you want to get.
Actually, I mean, I can say like
Unless you said you would say khubz jabali if you wanted,
mar'ou.
you know.
No, or sometimes like my
Khubz
grandma
salj.
asked me to go get bread. I like Lebanese. Yeah, she's like
Okay.
like just
Fair
to be
enough.
sure. Yeah.
Just to be sure.
Just mean globalism, you know, like people can buy everything everywhere now.
So true. Although the mushroom game in Lebanon isn't up to scratch, I don't think.
The what?
Mushroom game.
I mean,
There's
in
so many
French
canned
places.
mushrooms.
Yeah. You
It's
mean
so
fresh
popular.
mushrooms?
Yeah, there's not many fresh mushrooms.
Yeah. No, definitely not.
Because it's not really part of our cuisine.
Not so much. No.
No.
A lot of things are not. Basala, they're becoming a trend, like beetroot.
Which is weird because my parents would tell me that they used to eat sugar beets,
Yeah.
you know, because they used to make sugar, like crystal sugar, like what you eat,
Yeah.
from sugar beets in Lebanon. Whereas here they make it out of cane sugar.
Yeah.
But now it's become fashionable to eat beets.
And you know what's funny is like sometimes when we want to make something traditional, like a lot of the time, like the way my grandma would do things, like she would like if it's something that has milk, she would use powdered milk, for example.
Yeah, it's very common.
It's because like we always have electricity outages, so if you buy
can't have
real
fresh
meat,
milk.
you can't have fresh milk, you know. So sometimes having things that are more like less fresh is more like authentic in some
yeah,
times,
in
you
some
know?
ways, yeah,
In some ways,
absolutely.
yeah, because it's like
That's how
that's
they
how
would have
people
actually
get
do
by.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
So funny. Well, on that absolute bombshell of milk powder, yeah. Actually, that reminds me. When you flick the mandals over, there's a very beautiful, distinct click sound.
This
No,
one?
but if you just flick it, yeah, see that click sound? Does that come up in any of the microphones or anything like that?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, usually when I play, I try to do it softly.
Softly, okay.
But I mean, when it's
Sometimes,
fast stuff,
yeah.
I can't avoid it.
Yeah.
But sometimes, like in more like contemporary recordings, they would just like record, like even put a microphone here to get this.
I think it's brilliant.
No, it's nice.
Yeah. Actually, Aphex Twin has a great album called Drux. Do you listen to any Aphex Twin?
No, I heard of it, but not.
He has a great album where he does a prepared piano, like Disclavia piano.
Yeah.
And he puts microphones on all of the hammers and
thing.
stuff like that. And it sounds awesome.
Yeah.
We'll have a listen in a sec.
It's a bit like the breath, you know, when you record your voice and the's breath.
Exactly, it's the same
yeah.
thing. All right, well,
Cool.
fantastic. Thanks for coming on board.
No worries.
We'll do
Thank
this
you
again.
so much for having me.
Yalla.
Have a coffee.
Bye.
See ya.